Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio, your morning show, and we're live in downtown Winnipeg on 89.3 FM, 990 AM, or on the CBC Listen app. Thanks for joining us. Man, it is cold out there. Frigid is probably a better word. Light snow falling in Winnipeg, really trace amounts, but minus 24 is our current condition. Cold spot in the province right now is Sprague at minus 29, and the warm spot, this will give you context for what Manitoba's like. The warm spot today is minus 21, and that is McCreary. So we've got extreme cold warnings for most of the southern Manitoba, including Winnipeg, including Brandon, including Steinbach, blizzard warning up in Churchill, and extreme cold in Lynn Lake. So bundle up and get into Monday. Hello, Brad Lillies. Hello, Travis Peterson at the YouTube channel here, CBC Manitoba's. Good morning, Abby Adeyemi, who's going to be covering the cold and is our technical producer. And good morning, Nolan Kaler, who's here directing the show and will be covering the commute. It is 3 minutes to 6 o'clock, as mentioned. We are on air with you till 8:37 a.m. Big part of our show is news. Here's Heather Wells with your headlines.
Good morning. Well, former Premier Heather Stefanson resigns today as the leader of Manitoba's PC party. Stefanson announced she would step down at a delegation meeting over the weekend. She became Manitoba's first woman premier when Brian Pallister resigned in 2021. She says she is proud of the work she and her party did. So we'll be hearing from her coming up. As well, extreme cold, as Marcy mentioned, turned a water main break into an icy mess yesterday. Part of a Winnipeg strip mall flooded as that water main burst in the freezing cold. Water and mud gushing into several businesses at McPhillips and Church. So it is still icy there this morning. Be careful, and we'll tell you what happened there in more detail coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
That's the worst in that kind of weather, right?
Oh, it's just awful.
Yeah. Thank you, Heather.
You are welcome.
We do have crews out and about this morning once again, scraping yet another layer off the roadways and sanding, so pay attention as they're out and about, especially early. Well, in the program today, coming up after 8 o'clock, Indigenous Services Minister Patty Hajdu is involved in something in it being announced in Winnipeg today. She's going to talk about the proposed First Nations Clean Water Act and what it could mean for communities here in Manitoba. It was not well received federally when they first announced it at the federal level, I should say. So we'll hear more about that. And we'll also talk best and worst diets in the first hour of the show. Okay.
Today on Q with Tom Power. Vanessa Morgan starts.
Workers drain the ponds and are hoping winter temperatures kill any crayfish who remain.
And what I suspect happened was somebody had heard about the regulations that were coming in, that they might have felt the pressure to get rid of these crayfish. They just chose to release them in the parks, and that's never the correct option.
This month, Ontario banned more species of crayfish in a move Schreier and Hammer say will make it easier to stop invasives. And while they think the Burlington crayfish is contained to one area, their work isn't done. They say the species was recently detected in Nova Scotia. Justin Chandler, CBC News, Hamilton.
The Hollywood writer and actor strikes had delayed the 75th annual Emmy Awards, but the curtain will finally rise tonight. You probably recognize that theme song from the hit series Succession. It leads the pack with 27 nominations. In fact, 3 of the show's stars are up for Best Actor awards. That includes Brian Cox, Jeremy Strong, and Kieran Culkin, who is still basking in his Golden Globe win. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
That ominous music from Succession, right? Man, they were all jerks, those people. Good morning, everyone. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. Your morning show on CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM, or on the CBC Listen app. It's cold this morning, dangerous cold in some places. Blizzard warning up in Churchill, and Abby will talk about the extreme cold warnings in a moment. Right now, ice crystals minus 24 in Winnipeg. This hour on the program, you've likely heard of the Mediterranean diet, but is it something you should be following? We're going to look at different diets this hour on the program and also talk about why thinking about what you eat culturally and whom you eat with should also be part of what you're thinking if you're making a New Year's resolution to put different things into your body. Also, Heather Stephenson over the weekend announcing she will step down as leader of the Manitoba PC Party today, making it official, leaving questions about who may take over the reins. That's where our show begins in moments. Not before we hear from Heather Wells in what's making other news and headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, yes, you mentioned Heather Stephenson is resigning officially today. She was the first woman premier in the province. She took over when Brian Pallister resigned in 2021. One of the people considering a leadership run is Tory finance critic Abi Khan. He says he's not ruling it out. No date has been set yet for a leadership convention. Immigrants looking to resettle in Canada may have higher odds of doing so in Manitoba if they already have family here. The NDP government's refocusing the provincial nominee program to give priority to candidates who also have close family connections in this province. We'll hear more in our next local news at 6:30.
So, Heather, as you know, we're about to talk to Abby Adiyemi and to Nolan Kaler about weather and the commute. So does anyone care to share their sound effect for the cold? How about you, Heather? What did it feel like when you walked out this morning?
You know what? It's all about how you dress, right? Like, I didn't scream. You'd think I would because I'm not a fan of cold weather. But, I mean, it is about how you dress. Get great mitts, get a really good coat, and some nice boots, and you'll be fine.
Agreed. But my mitts were off to put the key in the door because I couldn't quite get grip. And I did have a moment of, that's my sort of cold sound
metal
effect.
in this weather can hurt. Wasn't
that great? Nolan, sound effect for the cold?
Ooh, that is the sound of me shattering on my sidewalk when I stepped on it. Not falling.
Oh, hearing that.
Almost did, but
ice.
just I stepped and the ice was under my foot, but also it was all of the bones in my body shattering because of the cold.
Yeah. Abby, care to attempt a sound effect?
And I think my sound effect is still the same I highlighted last week.
Yeah.
The guy in the neighborhood that starts his car at 3 o'clock in the morning.
So Abby's alarm right now is people trying to turn their cars over and they're stalling, and he's hearing the cars trying to turn over, and it's waking him up.
I really can't make that sound, but you know when the engine is just trying to like, and then you see like exhaust fog all over the place.
All right, it's going to stay cold for the day, right?
Yes, it's actually going to stay cold, but we have because we're talking about Winnipeg now, we got an extreme cold warning for southern Manitoba. You know, as this Arctic air continues to bring that dangerous cold temperatures through this region, the extreme cold is going to be combined by winds that's going to be gusting up to 30 kilometers an hour. So we should be expecting the wind chill to range from like minus 40 to minus 50. Now, that said, right now in Winnipeg, we are seeing light snow and, you know, ice crystals in the city with the temperature currently at minus 24 degrees. With the wind that is coming from the west, it is expected to shift to the northwest, and it's going to be gusting to 60 near noon. Throughout the day, we expect to see that light snow persist with a high of minus 20 degrees. But with the wind chill, it's going to be feeling like minus 37 this morning. And just a tip, if it's too cold for you to stay outside, then think about your pets.
Yeah, for sure. Animals too.
That's what I'm going to say. But right now in Winnipeg, it's minus 24 degrees.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
Let's get to the commute then with Nolan.
Yeah, so Heather was mentioning in her newscast just before the 6 o'clock news about the water main break at McPhillips and Church. That occurred yesterday, and obviously there's still going to be a lot of ice in that intersection as repairs begin today. So we're going to have to watch out for that if you're traveling on McPhillips northbound, especially as you're going through there. Highway's looking pretty good for this morning, but a reminder, we're going to be seeing a lot of snow clearing equipment as well as sanding crews out today, so give them the space that they need to be able to do their jobs out there as well. If you see anything out there on your Monday commute, do give us a call on the CBC commuter line. The number's 204-788-3093.
So let's get more into the politics that developed over the weekend in this province as the search will begin for a new leader now of Manitoba's PC party. Heather Stephenson announcing, as we've been telling you, she's stepping down effective today. She says for now she will keep her seat as the MLA of Tuxedo. This announcement came at a special meeting over the weekend as PC delegates were discussing new rules for the party's next leadership race. And that is where she spoke with reporters about how the process for choosing the next leader will be decided upon. Part of that conversation was with the CBC's political reporter, Ian Fraze.
I recuse myself from the whole debate that will take place around the leadership rules. I don't want any perception that I am trying to control the outcome of what happens today. I'm very much at peace with whatever our party decides, and so we'll see what happens. I think it's going to be a good, healthy debate today, and that's very exciting for our party.
You shared in the room that you're stepping down. How are you reflecting on it? What message did you share with the delegates?
I think what's really exciting is just the sheer number of people who are here today, both physically and virtually. And you can see that there's an incredible interest in the future of our party. And I believe, and I still believe, that we're going to be the best party to govern this province. And I think we have an opportunity after this leadership of being back in government. So I look forward to seeing what happens today and what happens and unfolds over the course of the leadership.
You were in kind of the day-to-day throes of being the premier and how busy that is.
Yeah.
There's been some months now that's allowed for, I guess, some period of reflection. Has it changed sort of how you reflect on the time that you had as premier?
No, I think, again, it was a fairly short period of time. I think we got a lot of great things done. Tax relief for Manitobans, many things that we were able to get done on behalf of Manitobans to help grow our economy here. So I'm very proud of our time in government and some of the things that we were able to achieve. I wish we had 4 more years to keep that momentum going, but that's okay. We respect the people of Manitoba. They have spoken and will continue to be a very strong opposition to this NDP government.
Are you going to fully serve out your full term as MLA?
So right now I am keeping my seat, and we'll just see. Obviously, leadership races, we'll see what happens out of the leadership race. Often, it can happen where it's someone from the outside who's not elected, and so we'll cross that bridge when it comes.
Is there a moment you're most proud of?
I would say I was proud of just that day when it was announced that I was when I was sworn in as Premier of Manitoba. It was pretty incredible.
You also you dealt with the spotlight of being the first female Premier. Mm-hmm. How do you reflect on that piece now?
You know what? I think it's great. I think the best part of that is that I know I won't be the last. So there always has to be a first, and I was honored to have been the first, but more honored just to be in the role and be able to get some things done for Manitobans.
What thoughts do you have about your time in leadership? It was sort of a challenge to come in when you did and face an election 2 years later.
I think we came a long way in a short period of time, but it just wasn't far enough to earn government again. And I think as a party, we are now going to go through a very healthy leadership race, and I look forward to seeing whoever will be taking over.
So that is over the weekend. The outgoing now leader of the PC party, though she'll make it official today, Heather Stephenson, in conversation with reporters in a scrum, including the CBC's Ian Fraze, who is our provincial affairs reporter, his proper title, pardon me. Now, among the delegates at that meeting over the weekend in Winnipeg, where they were talking about this, was Fort White MLA Abhi Khan, who, as you heard Heather mention, may put his hat in the ring. He wouldn't give much away about any potential favorites to take on the leadership role. He said his fellow delegates are hoping to make the party more reflective of the province that they represent.
Today was the first step in really listening to the grassroots of the party. We've been listening to them over the last couple of years. Today was, sitting down in a room of over 300 delegates. It was a good, positive step forward on what the delegates want for this province, and resoundingly, I think everyone in that room heard that they want a party that is more reflective of Manitoba. They want a party that is more reflective of the changing times, of the people, of the issues. So that's exciting. We'll take that away. I'll take that away, and we'll see what the future holds.
So not ruling it out, I guess we could say. Fair to say.
What I am saying is that today was a really good day for the grassroots of the party. I am first and foremost, number one priority is this party and the people of Manitoba. And whatever that is I want to make sure that that person is going to best represent this province, best represent the people of Manitoba. And that was what today was all about, listening to what our delegates, what our members want. And that's what the takeaway was. From that, we'll evaluate. I'll meet with my team and I'll meet with my family, and we'll see from there.
What do you make of the rules, specifically the point system? Are you in favor of the point system?
Yeah, I think you saw from the room that, again, it was the vast majority of people in that room were in favor of a weighted point system. Now, no system is going to be perfect, whether it's the one member, one vote, whether it's the delegate system or the weighted system. I think what it does show is that the times have changed. The PC party of Manitoba sees the times have changed. The members see that, delegates see that, and they want a party that's going to be reflective of the entire province. And the weighted system does just that. It awards constituencies that have more members to have more points, and it encourages whoever is running for leadership to get out and grow that membership, grow that base in traditionally non-held ridings. That way you can represent all of Manitoba, and that's what the next leader has to be. They have to represent all of Manitoba, not one riding, but everyone here.
So that is among the delegates at a special meeting over the weekend was that person. That's Fort White MLA Abhi Khan. You likely recognize his voice there. He wouldn't give much away about his thoughts for the future of the Manitoba Progressive Conservative Party and who might lead, whether or not his name's in the ring. You heard him going to be in the ring. You heard him kind of sidestep that question a few times with reporters. He was talking with CBC's provincial affairs reporter Ian Fraze and other reporters at this special meeting over the weekend. PC delegates are discussing these new rules for the party's next leadership race. And if you want to read more about the challenges to the rules, go to our website at cbc.ca/Manitoba, and you can also read some of the backstories. There was Shelley Glover, you might recall, ran for leadership and took exception to the system that is in place right now. And so that is why that's part of what has prompted discussions about moving forwards. You can read that. And on Heather Stephenson, we'll hear more officially later today as she steps down what her future might be. She did tell Ian that regarding the upcoming leadership race, it may lead to the selection of someone who is not elected, and that may prompt her to step aside. So that is something that's included in our web story, but we'll hear what she has to say. Right now, she's staying on as MLA of Tuxedo.
Ever hear a really good radio show and fall in love right away? Fall in love at first listen with the CBC Listen app. Find CBC radio shows like As It Happens and Now or Never and stream them anytime, anywhere for free. Download CBC Listen today.
How you doing out there? You on the treadmill watching InfoRad this morning? Maybe on the bike. Maybe you got earbuds in and you're braving the minus 24 degrees in Winnipeg this morning, walking out there. For better or worse, January is a time when people think about our fitness levels, and also you think about what you are eating. So if you're considering a new diet or you want to tweak your food choices, our next guest is here to talk about what you may want to avoid that you're seeing in your social streams and what you might want to lean into. Chiwe Asaguara is a registered dietitian here in Winnipeg. Hi there.
Good morning.
So I mentioned, Chiwe, I want to start right in with what people are reading a lot about. So the U.S. News and World Report recently came out with its annual January ranking of diets. So they included the Mediterranean diet and then the DASH diet. For people that don't know these, what do they have in common?
Yeah, so these diets they're similar, and what they have in common is their ability to reduce your risk of heart disease and stroke. And that's because they really promote more of lifestyle change and foods that are high in fiber, which has positive impacts on heart health. They're also high in omega-3 fatty acids, which are anti-inflammatory, also very beneficial for heart health. And they talk about having low sodium intake and low saturated fat, again, positive for heart health. So they're similar in that way. But why they are kind of talked about is more of this lifestyle approach that they take. So also talks about, eating meals with others, with family and friends, and cooking. So they just have some really good lifestyle changes that support heart health and reducing risk of stroke.
So if those are positive, what are some of the red flags people should watch out for that are signs of a quote-unquote bad diet?
So red flags would be for sure anything that seems extreme or kind of like something that would just kind of be really fast. So anything that promises rapid weight loss in a short period of time would definitely be a red flag. Anything that cuts out whole food groups, so no carbohydrates, potentially could be a red flag. And also anything that's really low in calories, like 1,000 calories, 1,200 calories a day. And as well, anything that for you to follow the diet, you have to purchase a product. So purchasing a supplement or a powder or bars, that would be a red flag as well.
Yeah, don't get caught by those influencers, right?
Yes.
In terms of, you talked about rapid weight loss when it's too quick. Some people might not know what that means. They might think, well, what is healthy if you are trying to get your weight down and improve with an eye to improving your health?
Yeah, so typically, half a pound to a pound a week is what would be a healthy rate of weight loss. And some people will see that in the beginning of a weight loss journey, and that could even slow down from there. So sometimes they'll have an expectation of wanting to lose, 10 pounds a week or more, or if a diet, says that it can help you do that, that's where you want to pause and think, okay, is this really realistic, or what would I need to do? How extreme would this diet be for that to actually happen?
If you had to pick one dietary change that you would suggest someone could make to improve their health, what might that be?
It's a bit of a two-part thought for me. So one is thinking about what you can add to your plate rather than remove. Start there. And I would say eat more fiber. Fiber is a really important nutrient for gut health and for heart health. So trying to eat more plants, more vegetables, more plant protein, more whole grains to get more fiber in throughout your day.
What makes a diet sustainable for a person?
So if we're looking at sustainable in regards to someone being able to stay on a diet, one, I think, is the way you think about it. So once something becomes restrictive, it's hard to stick with. So thinking of it more of a lifestyle change, nutritional changes, but also something that includes foods that you enjoy, so that you're looking forward to your meals, they taste good to you, you're happy to be eating them, something that's easy to implement so it doesn't have too many steps, it doesn't feel overwhelming. and also includes your cultural foods or foods that you grew up on and foods that are easy to access and that are affordable so that they fit your food budget.
In your opinion, I mean, I don't think we talk nearly enough about cultural food. You rarely see people talking about it in the context of regular diets, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So how important is that? Is that a growing area of people, you're here in Winnipeg, so we have such a diverse population in Manitoba. Is that a growing area where people are starting to think about that more and make recommendations?
Well, I think what is changing is, unfortunately, sometimes people have a belief that their cultural food is not healthy. And when they want to make nutrition changes, they're automatically thinking they have to remove those cultural foods. So anyone I'm talking to, I explore that with them and let's talk about what foods you grew up on, what foods you enjoy, how can you include them and keep them with your day-to-day nutrition in a way that's supporting your health.
Can you give us an example of that?
Yeah, so like for me, I'm West African Nigerian, so we have lots of different foods that we enjoy. Maybe like fried plantain might be something someone considers is unhealthy because it's a fried food. But we can look at, well, I talk about frequency and quantity. How frequent are you having that food and how much of it are you having when you have that food? So maybe we look at reducing either one of those, but still including it, because then there's that joy in eating that is really important for someone to be a happy, healthy person. And that's a big part of being healthy and nutritious.
I can't help but wanting to ask you before you go, revisiting something you said right at the beginning, which was part of this is, we're talking food, but you're also talking about who we eat with. You said, exploring eating with, meals with community or with family, bigger groups. Why is that part of the discussion?
That's part of the discussion because nutrition is beyond what's on your plate. It's also about connection and relationship and family and joy. When we have joy in our food, that is social. It's important for mental health, for a sense of community, and really just being a happy person. So cooking with others, sharing a meal with others, and also can be inspiring. You might learn about a different way of cooking or a different recipe that makes you want to actually get into your own kitchen and cook more food at home and try different recipes. So we don't want to separate who we are as people from nutrition. We want to find a way to connect them together, because when we talk about sustainable, that's what makes it sustainable in the long run, when you're happy and joyful when it comes to what you're putting on your plate.
Good conversation. Happy New Year, Chiwe. Thank you.
Thank you. Happy New Year to you as well.
That is Chiwe Asagwara, a registered dietitian here in Winnipeg. Coming up, we have business news as always. Crystal Ramlakan's going to be here. She'll talk about the latest inflation numbers that are set to come out tomorrow. And just to flag, Peter Harvey, who's a regular listener to the program, also drives truck and farms in Manitoba when he's not driving truck. He wrote to us from near Strathclair. He says it's minus 30 and there's some power outages out our way. And so the winds are strong and it's kind of scary and cold. So Peter, thanks for the update. We'll look into that and see how widespread it is. So stay safe and bundle up. Your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it is minus 24 right now, but that extreme cold continues. Winnipeg and all of southern Manitoba still under that extreme cold warning, as are parts of northern Manitoba. And in Churchill, it is a blizzard warning. In Winnipeg today, we will have some light snow, and that wind is going to pick up by noon, northwest 40, gusting to 60, with a risk of frostbite. Our high will be minus 20. Former Premier Heather Stefanson says it has been an honor. She resigns today as Manitoba's PC party leader. Stefanson announced her departure at a delegation meeting over the weekend. She became Manitoba's first woman premier when Brian Pallister resigned in 2021. Stefanson says she is proud of the work she and her party did, but she admits she faced some challenges.
It's not easy. There's within the days of social media, and sometimes the mainstream media as well is not so kind, but that's okay. I respect that you're doing your jobs, and I have my job to do as well. And so, I'll continue to get up every day and put one foot in front of the other and continue on.
No date has been set for a leadership convention to replace Stefanson, but the party has set new rules for how a leader is selected using a point system that puts a cap on areas with big constituencies. Well, extreme cold has turned a water main break into an icy mess. Part of a Winnipeg strip mall flooded yesterday as a water main burst in the freezing cold. Water and mud gushing into several businesses at the corner of McPhillips and Church. Manoj Sharma owns Sharma Ji Sweet House and Restaurant. He says the water was knee-high inside his restaurant.
The water was coming from the outside. All of a sudden, this water started flooding, and whole strip malls, all the shops started flooding. I asked the neighbor, he said the same thing happening. So we had to shut down the business right away.
Northbound lanes of McPhillips were also flooded. City crews worked to repair the leak in the middle of that extreme cold warning with conditions that felt like minus 34 when you factored in the wind chill yesterday. A house fire in the bitter cold forced several families out in North Point Douglas yesterday. Everyone managed to get out of the Grove Street house safely, but one firefighter was injured. Melanie White owns a rental house nearby. She says her tenant is spending the night at a hotel because of all the smoke, and she's had concerns about the house that burned for years.
Lots of different people in the house and lots of people at a time in the house, and lots of noise, and most of our houses around us are wonderful, right? So it's kind of the only one that's left right now that has been a problem.
Crews also put out a fire in an empty house on Toronto Street early yesterday. Prospective newcomers with family in Manitoba will soon have a better chance to live and work here. The NDP government's refocusing the provincial nominee program, matching newcomer workers with labor needs in this province, and now it's giving priority to applicants who have family in this province. Labor Minister Malaya Marcelino says recent nominee draws selected only candidates with a close family connection.
When applicants and newcomers to Manitoba have that strong connection to family and to Manitoba, they are more likely to stay and will have higher retention rates here for the province. So that's going to be really, really good news for us, for our economy.
The minister says the program will continue to primarily be an economic initiative. Dozens of families, caregivers, and their children braved yesterday's cold to fly kites at St. Vital Park, all in solidarity with Gaza. Pascal Nowicki is one of the organizers of Family Action for Palestine.
Kids are drawn to justice, and the concepts are very simple: caring for others, protecting those who are not protected. And so for them to be able to get involved in a way that feels accessible to them is very important.
Nowicki says the event was part of a global initiative for people to fly kites in solidarity with Gaza as that war between Israel and Hamas continues. The war marked its 100th day yesterday. Starting today, a coroner's inquest examines what happened when a man in Saskatchewan killed 11 people and injured 17 others. In September 2022, 32-year-old Miles Sanderson went on a stabbing rampage that began in the James Smith Cree Nation. He was arrested after a long manhunt and died in police custody. You can hear more national and international news on World Report at 7. Roughly 12 million Canadians will be getting their federal carbon tax rebates today. Those payments are quarterly. They go out to every tax-filing adult household in the province where the federal carbon tax applies, and so that includes Manitoba. Most people will get the rebate through direct deposit, but about 20% will get their rebate in the form of a check. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Heather Wells, I know this won't go citywide. Of course, it depends on your perspective where you're driving, but I think I want to take a second to shout out the city crews after the storm. Yes. I don't know what it's like in St. Vital, center of the city and around Pillow Park, kind of River Heights through this area. It's been really good. Oh, I think Heather's gone.
No, I'm here. Yeah, I'm listening.
So I don't know how
you're talking about roads?
Yeah, the clearing's been really good, and they're sanding and salting, following up, and even some sidewalks. And it was just quite quick after the storm last week, I found, in terms of the cleanup. Now, of course, I know it depends on the neighborhood you're in and such, but yeah, it's been really, really good. And I know it's a lot of work, so we don't always shout out people, but I think we should shout out some crews this morning.
Absolutely, yeah. And you're right. Like St. Vital, southeast of Winnipeg, I was out in Sage Creek as well on the weekend. Beautiful.
Really, eh? Okay. So there you go. Yay!
Yeah, bravo.
I always say when I start these things, I always realize it's like wah wah because it's like then ends with like it sounds like a golf clap on radio. There's just not enough of us here. All right, let's get into who is here. Abby Adeyemi standing by.
Well, my shout out is going to be going to the drivers of the Bobcats.
Oh, yeah.
Clear the sidewalks because those guys, when cold chill or no cold chill, they're there trying to make sure people using the sidewalks are like safe.
Yeah, they've done a pretty good job this morning.
Shout out to them. And talking about that, we have an extreme cold warning for southern Manitoba. You know, this is going to cover the whole of city of Winnipeg, the Pembina Valley region, Interlake region, Eastman, Westman, the Parkland region. We have an extreme cold warning there because it's going to be feeling like minus 40 to minus 50 at times. So you need to take care outside. And if we go up north, we also hear from Environment Canada that there's an extreme cold warning and a blizzard warning for northern Manitoba. Now, the extreme cold episode is going to be bringing winds that will make the chills so really dangerous, and they're explaining that the risks are greater for young children, older adults, and people with chronic illnesses. So they need to shelter proper and cover up for they need to cover up to prevent exposed skins. And for the blizzard warnings and the condition, they tell us that with the gusty winds, visibility is going to be reducing near to zero in the snow, and it's going to be affecting people on the highway because the wind will be gusting like 70 to 80 kilometers. So if you're driving on the highway in the northern part of the province, you need to take care. Right now, Winnipeg is at minus 24. Brandon is at minus 26. Thompson is at minus 24. Churchill is at minus 22, Steinbach minus 25, Morris minus 25. Winnipeg, we are at minus 24.
Thank you, Abby.
You're welcome.
Time for the commute update with Nolan.
Yeah, we were just shouting out those roadway clearing crews.
Yeah, for sure.
A reminder, if you are in zones A, I, R, O, K, and T, the snow clearing is happening this morning starting at 7 o'clock. So do give the crews the space they need to do their jobs. And of course, that applies to our residential parking as well. So keep an eye on those cars as crews get that snow off of the streets. Aside from that, you can also, by the way, check what zone you are in, winnipeg.ca/snow. On the commute, Heather was mentioning in her newscast McPhillips at Church Street, because of that water main break yesterday, that's still going to be very, very slick. So take extra care as you're moving through that part of the city. Repairs are going to be beginning today on that water main break as well. So be careful as crews are on scene there. I'm not seeing anything else here on the commute this morning, Marcy, but if people are, they can give me a call over on the CBC commuter line. The number is 204-788-3093.
I've been busy trying to make a word out of the letters you put out.
Oh.
It's hard. AIROKT.
Trokai.
I know. I came up with Traco and Talker. Neither are words.
I'll keep working on it. I'll get back to you before in my next traffic report.
Make a game show out of where you can't park. All right. Thank you, Nolan.
You bet.
It is 21 minutes to 7 o'clock. Crystal Lee Ramlakan is here now with our business report. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, Marcy.
So the latest inflation numbers are set to come out tomorrow. What are we expecting?
Well, economists are forecasting inflation will likely went up last month, but that isn't expected to set off alarm bells as long as underlying price pressures ease. So forecasters are predicting December's rate to come in above November's 3.1%, as gas prices fell more significantly a year ago than they did last month. Now, CIBC thinks inflation will come in at 3.4%, but even if annual inflation did come in higher or rise last month, economists say that doesn't mean price growth is heading in the wrong direction. The Bank of Canada is focused on core measures of inflation, which strip out volatility in price movements. And if those figures fall, it would suggest that price pressures have continued to fade, giving the central bank some relief. Now, the central bank is also paying attention to how inflation has evolved over the last couple of months, rather than simply just the price change from a year ago. And, the price of food is expected to continue to ease, but that doesn't necessarily mean that affordability will improve for families because prices are still rising, just at a slower pace. Now, the central bank held its key interest rate steady at 5% throughout the fall of last year. Economists widely expect it to start cutting interest rates once it's more confident inflation is headed toward its target of 2%.
Let's go to another story. Why will thousands of people who borrowed money from non-prime lenders soon be receiving letters?
Well, these letters are warning them they could lose access to credit because of new federal regulations that would cap maximum interest rate charges at 35%, down from 47%. Now, the letters are being sent by the Canadian Lenders Association, which represents banks and installment lenders, but not payday loan providers. And the letters are a lobbying effort to persuade the federal government to include concessions for lenders who serve millions of Canadians whose credit scores are not strong enough to qualify for loans at most traditional banks. Now, the government says it's just trying to crack down on predatory lending here with these changes to protect vulnerable Canadians. But the association says the changes may push more people to payday loans, which actually charge even higher interest rates and are exempt from the criminal interest rate rules. But advocates for low and moderate income people don't agree with this. They question whether lenders are charging high interest rates to absorb defaults, or are they just squeezing people who don't have any other options. They say installment loans do not help build credit scores, and they say they actually do the opposite because people then fall into a debt trap. Now, experts say establishing an alternative to assessing a customer's credit through open banking, which allows financial data to be shared between banks and third-party service providers, could actually help people more. They say the current system sometimes fails to accurately assess a person's ability to repay loans.
And this morning you also have some insight into how people are spending their money on cannabis.
Yes, well, almost 3/4 of people in an annual survey from Health Canada are buying their cannabis from legal sources. Only 37% of people were doing that in 2019, the year after Canada first legalized cannabis. Now, the most purchased kinds of pot were dried flower or leaves, edibles, and vape pens or cartridges. And people who used cannabis in the year leading up to the survey said they typically spend close to $63 a month, and that's actually a drop from the $73 in 2018. Now, this survey was of almost 12,000 Canadians, but industry experts say the data may be impacted by people not wanting to report that they buy from illegal sources or use cannabis because of stigma.
What's going on in the market so far this morning?
So in Europe, markets are slipping as investors gear up for the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. Germany, the UK, and France are all down. In Asia, markets are mixed. Japan is up, Shanghai is up, Hong Kong is down. Oil is down 56 cents to $72.12 US per barrel. Gold is up $3.66 to $2,052.72 US per ounce. And the dollar is down 0.04 of a cent to 74.53 cents US.
Via Zoom, that's Crystalie Ramlicam with our business news. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Marcy. You too.
That is heard every morning on our show, by the way, our business news with Crystalie here at Information Radio. Time right now is 6:45. Giving Crystalie a big wave. Goodbye. She'll join us again tomorrow, as mentioned, in Winnipeg. Ice crystals minus 24 on our Monday morning. It is cold. So if you are planning to stand at the bus stop, dress accordingly and don't go too early because with wind chill on exposed skin, it feels like minus 38. So there's only so much you can wrap, right? There's always that little part of the top of your cheeks that's exposed, even if you've got a scarf across your face, which you will today. Brandon with light snow falling, by the way, minus 26. And I should mention that we are under extreme cold warnings here in southern Manitoba. That includes Winnipeg, Brandon, and to the east as well. It does also include the area around, I'm just looking for Steinbach. Maybe it's not included here. Yeah, Steinbach is included, as well as Selkirk and such. And there's a blizzard warning up in Churchill this morning, so just want to mention that as well. Well, over the weekend, if you were tuned into Cross Country Checkup, they touched on a subject that affects a lot of families across Canada. Really, anyone who has kids in sports, who has played sports themselves as a kid, has seen parents who've crossed the line and sometimes taken out their frustration on referees. And those referees are often teenagers or young people themselves. You might have heard the story about a soccer league in Quebec. They're going to go so far as to equip teen referees with body cameras starting this summer. That's to deter abuse from coaches and parents. So yesterday on Cross Country Checkup on CBC, they asked, have you seen parents and coaches cross the line? And how do we protect young referees and umpires? What should be done moving forward? Here's some of the calls that were shared with Ian Hennemansing.
I spent 7 or 8 years on different hockey boards. One of the things that we had done in one of the associations I was a member of is when we had a parent, literally a parent, standing there and berating a teenage referee, name-calling. One of the conversations we had with this parent specifically was, the referee was 14 and his child was 13. And so you sit there and you look and go, it's not acceptable. You wouldn't accept that for someone to talk to your child like that. Why would you speak to someone else's child? The next year he joined our board as the head referee, stayed on as a ref, and proceeded to have conversations with parents in our beginning of the year coach-parent meetings to just describe he was one of those bad parents. And now that he's been a ref, he understands the other side of it.
I know personally from my father, he was one of those people, he was just always angry. He was the one yelling at everybody. He was yelling at the refs and the coaches and other parents as well. But he would get so angry, more angry than we would. And one time he took my backup goalie stick and tried to swing it at one of the referees. And it caused a whole bunch of drama. And then the coach got involved and my dad took it out on the coach. And then long story short, I wasn't able to play for the competitive league anymore, for the rep team, for the B team. So it kind of put me in a position where I couldn't even play hockey anymore. I felt like embarrassed and kind of ashamed, like how could he do that to me? It sucked, having to kind of forfeit a sport that I was actually good at, that I enjoyed, that kept me out of trouble.
When I started out as a referee in New Brunswick, we always refereed on our own. We didn't have enough referees to have assistant referees, so you're always by yourself. You have to have that community support. If you feel like you're on your own, literally or figuratively, you show up at games and you send in your reports, and no one from the league and no one from the community is there to support you. No wonder, of course, that over 2/3 of referees, not only in hockey, but also in sports like soccer, quit within 2 years of starting.
I found the parents forget that 90% of the time, these coaches and referees are volunteer.
How about a quick message, Judy, to parents who may be listening and maybe they're kind of starting now to wonder if they're the person that's crossed the line. What advice do you have for them?
Stay in your seat and keep your mouth shut. Seriously.
All right.
Let them play the game. It's just a game for children to learn. And they can't learn if there's chaos about, right?
Coach Shelton says, stay in your seat and shut your mouth. That's good advice. I appreciate it.
You got to check yourself. There's so many stories of terrible behavior, and you got to think, what is this role modeling doing, or lack of role modeling, perhaps? The phone lines were full yesterday. That was Cross Country Checkup. You heard host Ian Hennemansing there. Their question: how do we protect young referees and umpires? And have you seen parents and coaches crossing the line? You can call us too locally here, 788-3205 if you've got a story. And if you want to hear the whole Cross Country Checkup, you can check out their podcast or on the Listen app, cbc.ca/checkup.
Whether you're hanging out or out on the move, stay in the know with CBC Listen. The cost of living with Paul Havershrud goes beyond facts and figures.
Real estate is the 800-pound gorilla of Canada's economy.
And What on Earth with Laura Lynch explores the climate change crisis, problems and solutions.
What happened that made you start to think and see climate change differently?
The cost of living and What on Earth. Available now on CBC Listen.
Minus 24 ice crystals in Winnipeg and an extreme cold warning issued for today. In the next hour of the show, we're going to talk to a woman who was told it'll be cold in Winnipeg when you move from South Africa. But what is she thinking this morning? We'll find out. That's coming up at 7:40. Right now, for Republican presidential hopefuls, all roads lead to Iowa. That state marks the official kickoff of the presidential nomination process today. GOP voters in the Midwest state will choose their pick to top the ballot in 2024. Now, former President Donald Trump continues to hold a commanding lead over his next closest rivals, Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley. To talk about the Iowa caucuses, Paul Waldman is with us, columnist with MSNBC. He is in Washington. Good morning.
Good morning.
So most Canadians know, because we follow a lot of U.S. politics, but some may not. How critical are the Iowa caucuses in the election cycle?
Well, they're critical because everybody says they're critical. It's a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. This dates back to 1976 when an obscure Georgia governor camped out in Iowa for an entire year, met just about every voter in the state, won the caucuses, and ended up becoming president. That was Jimmy Carter. And ever since then, we've treated them as though they can determine who becomes president. However, if I were to read you off a list of names like Rick Santorum, Mike Huckabee, Ted Cruz, if you remember who they are at all, you know that none of them became president of the United States. They all won the Iowa caucuses for Republicans in recent elections. So it doesn't actually end up determining who becomes president, but everybody treats it as important because we've been waiting for the last year or two for the presidential campaign to really ramp up, and all the candidates go there. They spend a lot of time there. I believe Ron DeSantis has visited all of Iowa's 99 counties. Reporters go there, write a lot of stories about it, and it gets kind of built up into this life or death contest. Even if in the end we may look back and say, oh, it turned out that it really didn't make much of a difference.
Mm-hmm. How do they work, the caucuses? How are they different from a primary?
Well, in sane places, you go into the polling place, you cast your ballot, and you go home. That is not how it works in Iowa. It's a sort of old-timey procedure where you have to go there at a specific time at 7 p.m., and you don't cast a private ballot. You go and stand in a corner, say you're in a high school gymnasium. You go and stand in the corner with all the other people who are supporting your candidate, and then little speeches are given by representatives of the campaigns, and if a candidate has less than 15% of that threshold, they have to go vote for somebody else. So there's some horse trading that goes on, and the whole thing can take a couple of hours, which means that a lot of people just can't make it. If you have a job where you can't come for that long, if you have a disability and you can't make it to the polls. And so turnout in the caucuses is extremely low. The last time we had contested caucuses on both sides in 2016, turnout was only about 15%. And so this time it may be even lower, especially considering that it is Canadian-like weather down there today in Iowa. I think it's supposed to be around minus 20 Celsius. So that could keep a lot of people home, too, which means that a very small number of people are going to decide who wins.
Everybody up here following the NFL down there was knowing what your weather's been like. I'm thinking about Buffalo now, but certainly Iowa cold as well. I watched that debate, one of the debates last week between Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis. One of the topics that came up, these are candidates, of course, former candidate Chris Christie suspended his campaign last week, just before that debate happened, actually, between the two I mentioned. How does this shake things up in Iowa for Republicans?
Well, Christie's whole campaign was based on the proposition that he wanted to stop Donald Trump from becoming the Republican nominee. And it turned out that there were not all that many Republicans who were on board with that. However, the people who were supporting him are probably going to gravitate toward Haley. She is sort of the least Trumpy of the remaining candidates. And if we presume that Trump is going to win in Iowa, then who comes in second and who comes in third will make a big difference. Even though you might say, objectively speaking, if Haley gets 20% and DeSantis gets 19%, or vice versa, does it really matter all that much? Well, it will matter in the story that gets told. And so if a few of those Christie voters are enough to push her in front of DeSantis, that means that then all the stories tomorrow will be about how she won this kind of great moral victory, and the DeSantis campaign is on its last legs, and he might as well just drop out of the race right now, which can make a big difference. It's another one of those sort of self-fulfilling prophecies. If that's the story that gets written about you, then voters they start to turn away. It becomes harder to raise money. You end up on this kind of spiral downward that makes it impossible for you to keep going. And so it could make a big difference to that degree if it is really close for second and third.
Can you explain to Canadians why Donald Trump is still in this race?
It is a mystery because at the moment,
or how I should say, yeah.
Short of him literally dropping dead, it's hard to imagine what scenario could keep him from becoming the Republican nominee. He led an insurrection to overthrow the government. He is facing 91 criminal indictments, and nothing seems to diminish his support among Republicans. It's a truly remarkable thing. But he has convinced the bulk of his party that he is their champion, and everything bad that happens to him is just the result of a conspiracy against him and against them and their way of life that is attempting to be destroyed by dastardly liberals. And for a great many Republicans, that is a message that continues to resonate, and he has created a kind of cult of personality that is still very powerful.
And right now, the system that you have down there still allows him to be in the race.
Absolutely. There's nothing legally to prevent you from running, even if you're in prison.
Yep. Thank you very much, Paul. We'll watch today and see what happens and see how spot on your analysis is going to be tomorrow morning. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks.
That's Paul Waldman, columnist with MSNBC. We reached him in Washington this morning. The latest in national and international news, by the way, is moments away on World Report. Right now, it's 3 minutes to 7 o'clock on 89.3. I'm Marcy Marcusa. We're live in downtown Winnipeg. It's freezing. And Heather Wells is here with a news update. Hi.
Hello. Yes, it is a bitter morning to be without heat, but that's what we're hearing about in an outage in part of western Manitoba. The Manitoba Hydro map shows that outage stretches from Newdale west to Strathclair and north to Oakburn and Olha. About 1,000 homes and businesses are impacted. The power went out just before 6 this morning and is expected to be restored about 9 o'clock. Former Premier Heather Stephenson resigns today as PC party leader. She announced at a weekend delegation meeting she would step down today. Stephenson, as we know, became Manitoba's first woman premier when Brian Pallister resigned in 2021. No date has been set yet for a leadership convention. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 7:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, how cold, you might be wondering. Minus 24. We're only going to be around minus 20 for the day. Some light snow falling and the wind. The wind always makes it feel colder even, right? And just more bitter when you're trying to wait for the bus or walk to work. Winds today, northwest 40, gusting to 60. And right now in the city, with wind chill, feels like minus 38 on exposed skin. We're under an extreme cold warning. That is most of southern Manitoba, including Winnipeg, Brandon, Steinbach. Your main areas down south. There's a blizzard warning looking north. That's Churchill has a blizzard warning. And also that extreme cold warning does extend through Lynn Lake, Leaf, and Puckatawagan and Brochet. So bundle up. In traffic, McPhillips north at Church, you could still have some conditions that are icy after a big water main break issue there. Otherwise, there's crews out this morning continuing the clearing and sanding, so watch for them. 788-3093 is the traffic line. In the next hour of the show, a lot of people talk about today as being Blue Monday, but there's really no such thing. It started as a marketing ploy. It is, however, an excuse to talk about mental health in the winter months, and so our mental health columnist is going to join us after 7. As well, we're going to check in with a South African woman now living in Winnipeg about what winter is like here compared to what she thought it might be like. She's new to the community. And a mental health expert joins us for a serious conversation about racial trauma following the shooting death of a 19-year-old student in Winnipeg last month. Stay with us.
On the Current.
And yet there are still lighthouses where families keep the watch together.
It's called living on the lights. The job of a lighthouse keeper seems like something from past centuries, but there are people in Canada who still do that job. The life of a modern day lighthouse keeper coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning from CBC News. I'm Marcia Young. The coroner's inquest into one of Canada's worst mass stabbings begins today. In September 2022, on James Smith Cree Nation in Saskatchewan, Miles Sanderson killed 11 people and injured 17 others. He was arrested after a days-long search and died in RCMP custody. Sam Sampson has more on how the community is preparing for this inquest.
This is where we warm up the rocks here.
It's minus 30 degrees. James Smith Cree Nation elder David Burns doesn't just use this fire to warm up, but also to keep his sweat lodge hot.
You know, that we are spirit to be with us.
These sweats, a way to prepare for a graphic inquest that will be 2.5 weeks long.
Not everybody seeks the lodge. Some people do go to church. Some people are still struggling with their addictions. Some of them are using that as to try and cover it up. But the people that are coming to the lodge, there is some progress being made.
Many hope this inquest supplies answers to questions about why Miles Sanderson, a wanted man with a criminal history, was free to commit such violence. More than 30 people are expected to testify, including staff from the Parole Board of Canada and Sanderson's former partner. Saskatchewan Chief Coroner Clive Wayhill insists inquests are not meant to find fault, but to prevent future tragedies.
So let's honor the people that passed away. Let's have their story told. Put rumors to rest so people factually know what happened, and hopefully we can get some good recommendations at the end.
There will be a second inquest in late February to explore how Sanderson died in police custody, but really it's one thing at a time, as many people in this area prepare to relive a nightmare. Sam Sampson, CBC News, Melfort, Saskatchewan.
The U.S. says the Houthis in Yemen have targeted one of its ships in the Red Sea. Last week, U.S. and British militaries attacked Houthi facilities. British Defence Minister Jeremy Shapps delivered a speech this morning in London. He says last week's strikes defended the billions of dollars in vital shipping that moves through the region.
End your illegal and unjustified actions. Stop risking innocent lives. Cease threatening the global economy. We could not have been clearer with our warnings, which they chose to ignore, and enough was enough.
The Houthi missile is the first known attempted attack on U.S. ships since last week's strikes in Yemen. Donald Trump is facing his first major test to become the Republican presidential nominee. The Iowa caucuses happen tonight. Candidates will deliver speeches, and Republican Party members will vote on who they want to lead their party. Polls suggest Trump has a commanding spot in the state. The CBC's Katie Simpson has more from Des Moines, Iowa.
I would much rather be an underdog. That's how I've done every race that I've ever been in.
Ron DeSantis is bracing for what could be a brutal night in his political career. The Florida governor, who was originally thought to be Donald Trump's strongest challenger for the Republican presidential nomination, has failed to connect with voters and is sitting a distant third in the polls, making space for Nikki Haley, the former UN ambassador, to emerge as the most prominent, credible Republican alternative to Trump.
But the only way we're going to win the majority of Americans is if we have a new generational leader.
Haley needs a strong second-place showing in Iowa before heading into the next state, New Hampshire, where polls show she has a shot of actually winning. Her team is trying to build a narrative to convince voters that she can eventually beat Trump, even if she doesn't get out to an early lead. It's no small feat given Trump's grip on the party's base. His voters are enthusiastic and engaged. Many of the state nomination contests, including Iowa, are seen widely as formalities to confirm Trump's victory rather than competitive races. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Des Moines, Iowa.
Thousands of farmers are using their tractors and trucks to block the streets of Berlin. The farmers are protesting the German government's plan to hike taxes on farming operations. It has already backtracked on a decision to scrap a tax rebate for new farming vehicles. It has also agreed to phase out its subsidy on agricultural diesel rather than cutting it altogether. But farmers say that is not enough to ensure the stability of the industry. Oxfam is shining a light on global wealth inequity. It has released a new report that shows the world's poorest 60% of people have less money than before. And the world's 5 richest men have doubled their fortunes since 2020. Alima Shivji is the interim chief executive of Oxfam.
A new form of economic aristocracy is rising. And while the majority of the world struggles, the 5 richest men have more than doubled their fortunes, from around $400 billion to over almost $900 billion. Can you imagine what that money could be used for if it wasn't going into the pockets of the 5 richest men?
Shivji says 7 of the world's 10 biggest corporations have a billionaire as their CEO or principal shareholder. Meanwhile, most people worldwide are working harder for longer hours, often for poverty wages and unsafe jobs. Oxfam is calling on government to break up corporate monopolies, empower workers, and to tax the ultra-rich. The polar vortex that froze Western Canada this weekend is moving east. Environment Canada has issued extreme cold alerts for nearly all of Saskatchewan and a large portion of Manitoba, too. As Emily Williams tells us, those record-breaking cold temperatures have put a big strain on services in Alberta.
It was the coldest January 14th on record at the Edmonton International Airport at minus 45.1, close to minus 55 with the wind. Thomas Anderson with Environment Canada says temperatures are expected to moderate today.
Not as bitterly cold, but still cold compared to what we've seen for this winter so far.
Those providing shelter to the vulnerable in the province are feeling the pressure. Gary Saint-Amand is the CEO of Edmonton's Bissell Centre. He says they expected 50 people on Saturday night, but instead ended up with 230.
And certainly our team has felt, the pressure of that, as has the community.
The extreme temperatures also mean that the electricity grid is under strain. A weekend emergency alert asked Albertans to limit usage and prompted conversations about the reliability of renewables. University of Alberta professor Andrew Leach says they aren't enough to get through a really cold, dark night in Alberta.
You could have had 50,000 megawatts, all the solar farms and wind farms in the world located in Alberta, and it still wouldn't have come anywhere close to closing that gap.
A few unplanned outages were reported by ATCO Electric and Fortis Alberta on Sunday. Both companies supply a bulk of the province's electricity. Emily Williams, CBC News, Edmonton.
Yukon's oldest independent newspaper is looking for a refresh. The Whitehorse Star is 124 years old, and now it's asking the community for help to better serve its readers. The CBC's Mike Rudick reports.
I love the ink rubbing off on my fingers.
Scott Maynard says there are few things better than picking up a copy of the Whitehorse Star.
Tangible aspects of reading a newspaper that you don't get off digital.
For more than a century, readers like Maynard have been relying on the Star. The paper is an institution in Whitehorse, even writing the first draft of Yukon's history. But like the rest of the print media industry, the Star is struggling, losing subscribers and advertisers to the digital space.
The Star is a real cherished community asset.
Max Fraser is a former reporter and editor for the Star. He has been asked to come back and increase newspaper sales.
The Star is facing some challenges and needs to come up with a new business strategy for the future so it can continue to publish local news and content for local people.
Michelle Pierce is the Star's co-owner. She says it's important for the paper to also remain independent.
We are a small local business, but we're still here for the community. It seems like every day we hear about another newspaper closing. So much is going to social media and online and digital.
The Whitehorse Star has seen and chronicled plenty of change over its history. Now, the paper hopes with public input and support, it can keep the presses running well into the future. Mike Rudick, CBC News, Whitehorse.
Today, the United States marks Martin Luther King Jr. Day. It is a federal holiday, but Martin Luther King III told CNN it's not supposed to be a day of rest.
Martin Luther King Jr. holiday gives us the opportunity to turn to each other, to support, to work with each other, to volunteer and engage in service. My mom always said it's a day on, not a day off.
He says America is more divided today than it was back in his father's time. Martin Luther King Jr. spent his life advocating against racial inequality in the United States. But MLK Day did not get federal recognition until nearly 20 years after his assassination in 1968. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report News Anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. We are very cold across the province this morning. Extreme cold warnings here in the south. Thanks for joining us. Hopefully you're bundled up or getting ready to get out of your warm bed. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team here at Information Radio on CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM, or on the CBC Listen app or on YouTube. Well, right out the gate, let's just mention that Fort LaBosse School Division has buses not running. All schools are also closed today, and that's because of poor road conditions, so I'll note that while we're still talking weather. This hour on the show, we're going to talk to a woman who's fairly new to Winnipeg. She comes from South Africa. She said she knew it would be cold, but stay tuned. Also, Blue Monday, it is started by a marketing company years ago to sell winter destination vacations, or escaping the winter, I should say. But it is also an excuse to talk about what can be a very difficult time of year for people struggling with their mental health. So we'll do that with our mental health columnist in a moment. Plus, I just want to mention that at 10 to 8, we have a serious interview this morning. We're going to talk to yet another mental health expert. This time, though, we're talking specifically about what racial trauma is and why some may be experiencing this following the shooting death of a 19-year-old student last month in Winnipeg. So that's coming up as well. Right now, Heather Wells is in with a headline update. Hi there.
Hi there. Well, today is the day. Former Premier Heather Stephenson says she will step down as PC party leader. Now, Stephenson became Manitoba's first woman premier when Brian Pallister resigned in 2021. She says she is proud of the work she and her party did. Extreme cold has turned a water main break into an icy mess. Part of a Winnipeg strip mall flooded yesterday as a water main burst in the freezing cold. Water and mud gushed into businesses at the corner of McPhillips and Church. We're going to hear from one business owner there. And we'll also tell you about the problems with power on this bitterly cold morning. No heat at all in parts of western Manitoba. Manitoba Hydro says an outage stretches from Newdale to Strathclair, Oakburn, Oaha, Rossman Lake, we're hearing also included. So more than 1,000 customers, 1,000 homes and businesses affected this morning on this very dangerously cold morning. So we'll have the latest on that coming up in our next news at 7:30.
Yeah, Peter Harvey, one of our longtime listeners, wrote in, kind of scary. He's out that way around Strathclair, so hopefully it'll be restored soon.
Yeah, and hopefully you have candles and lots of blankets. And yeah, you're right, Manitoba Hydro does say estimated restoration around 9.
All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's get into the rest of the forecast. Here's Abby Adeyemi.
Good morning, Marcy. Environment Canada has actually issued an extreme cold warning for southern Manitoba and an extreme cold warning and a blizzard warning for northern Manitoba. For southern Manitoba, it's going to cover Winnipeg all the way down to the Pembina Valley, the Parkland region, and the west and the east Interlake region. All that part is under the extreme cold warning advisory from Environment Canada. But right now in Winnipeg, we are at minus 24 degrees. The wind has picked up from the west as we move through today. Light snow will persist through and then we'll be seeing a high of minus 17 degrees. The wind is actually something to be mindful of, as it's around minus 35 this morning, and then when it's close to noon period, it's going to be around minus 27. But there's a risk of frostbite, and don't forget that extreme cold warning I talked about. But right now in Winnipeg, we are currently at minus 24.
All right, thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and that blizzard warning specific to Churchill and York, so that part of the north, and those, Abby's right, with wind chill on exposed skin, it could feel like minus 38, but actual temperature, not much warmer than that, frankly, but it's just cold out there. Let's get to the commute and see if it's causing any issue. Hi there, Nolan Kaler.
Good morning. Yes, one issue to tell you about that has popped up since I was last here is a collision that happened at Confusion Corner this morning. That happened just as we were coming off the air at 7 o'clock, but crews have already cleared that intersection. Only the southbound curb lane remains blocked. All other lanes are now open in there. So what could have been quite a problem has been mostly averted at Confusion Corner this morning. Also, we heard in Heather Wells' newscast about the water main break at McPhillips at Church. That will obviously still be very slick this morning, and crews will be on scene to repair that a little bit later on today. So do take care as you are watching those crews. And as of 15 minutes ago, zones A, I, R, O, K, and T have a residential parking ban in effect as crews make their way around clearing snow this morning.
Now, in the last hour, when we were throwing out all those letters, I was trying to make a word, have a game show for it, and I couldn't come up with a word while you were talking, but you've got,
I've got
one.
I have got one,
Okay.
and that word is troika. Troika.
I wrote that down. What does it mean, though?
A troika is an Eastern European 3-horse sled. How appropriate for how we are getting around here in the city of Winnipeg and across the province on this Monday morning. If you see anything else out there on your commute, be it car, bike, or troika, give us a call on the CBC commuter line, the number 204-788-3093.
Well, as I mentioned, January features a day that sounds quite discouraging from the vantage point of our mental health. Today is, well, come to be known as Blue Monday, the third Monday of January on the calendar. Blue Monday, though, is something of a myth. Still, for our mental health columnist, as I alluded to, Mark Hannock, he says it's an opportunity to talk about some very real ways that we are affected by cold and by winter weather. Mark joins us now with our mental health column. Hi there, Mark.
Hi, Marcy.
So tell us what Blue Monday is supposed to be and then what it is actually.
Yeah, so the folklore around Blue Monday is that it's said to be the most depressing day of the year, and for a number of alleged reasons. It's cold out, so getting around is much more of a hassle. The days are shorter, so it's dark for longer periods. And you're realizing all the holiday debt that you've racked up over the last few weeks. But like a lot of misinformation and pseudoscience, Blue Monday really taps into small bits of truth in order to give it an intuitive ring of legitimacy. And then it jumps to overgeneralizations and lots of unsupported conclusions. The problem with that is that it can actually become a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, what's called an expectancy effect, if you believe it too much. Now, that's what effective marketing does. It shapes behavior. And that's really all that Blue Monday is. It's marketing. It was invented in 2005 by a travel agency to sell winter vacations. So, what is Blue Monday then in reality? It's just another Monday in January. That's about it.
So let's look at the wider picture and use this as an opportunity, as you said, to learn more about our mental health in the winter. How does the season actually affect people?
Yeah, some affective disorders like depression can indeed follow a seasonal pattern. And that's kind of the kernel of truth that this myth is piggybacking off of. Remember, we're less than 3 weeks in from the first day of winter here, so we've got a while to go yet. And I mention that because it's a reminder that we're still just adapting to the season change. And as humans, we're sensitive to change. We're hardwired to notice differences in our environment. So I think there's a sense here that if you feel different around changes in the season, then you're actually perfectly normal. Your body and your brain are doing exactly what they've evolved to do. Now, that said, there are some unique environmental characteristics of winter which can contribute to winter pattern depression in particular.
I'm guessing you're going to talk about light, because in Manitoba we often say, yes, it's cold, but at least we get blue sky, unlike Grey Vancouver. You hear a lot of people saying that. Is light the big one?
Yeah, that for me is the major one, light or the lack thereof. I mean, much of Canada this time of year only gets about 9 hours of straight daylight per 24-hour period. So spending that much time in darkness, it really affects a number of aspects of our well-being. And that's because when natural light enters your eyes, it lands on your retinas and it triggers a whole cascade of biological reactions inside your body. It's a major factor, for example, in our circadian rhythm or our sleep cycle. Our environment and our body wants us to sleep more, wants us to hibernate in winter, but our society and sometimes our boss doesn't exactly allow for that, right? So, I think as a result, we're going to bed when it's dark. We're probably waking up and it's still dark, and that can make us feel a bit out of sync with the world. There's also this interesting phenomenon, though, which is that sunlight is actually linked to serotonin secretion, the neurotransmitter serotonin. Skin cells appear to directly produce serotonin when exposed to ultraviolet light from the sun. So when you don't have as much exposure to natural light, I think it's reasonable to deduce that it'll have a direct biological connection to lowered mood. This is a good reminder for us that whenever you do see and feel the light in the wintertime, get out there and enjoy it. I came across this old English word to capture that unique sensation. The word is apricity, and it's the warm, pleasant feeling of the sun on your skin in the winter. I love that.
I like that word too, apricity. Yeah, it even sounds like what it feels like. So what are some strategies to cope then, Mark?
So while depression is known for persistent sadness, feelings of hopelessness, loss of interest, the winter pattern in particular adds in a number of other factors, including oversleeping and overeating, especially carbs. Now that latter one, it's probably in part an evolutionary drive to store up calories for survival. It might also be part being inside around your food more, so it's more available. It might be harder to regulate your sleep cycle. We mentioned the light piece, but you're also expending less energy because you're less physically active. So these symptoms give us a few entry points for coping strategies as well. You can't change the length of the day, but you can change what you do with those hours that you have. So to focus on the exercise piece one, or the energy expenditure, make a conscious effort to build a regular exercise routine into your winter days. Even just a short duration at low intensity, it can make a positive difference. So weather permitting, get outside if you can do so safely. Bundle up, go for a walk. 20 minutes is plenty to help your mental health. Then while you're out, you can layer in some other coping strategies. Notice nature, and then take note of how seeing nature makes you feel. Even just the bare sidewalk trees or the occasional parquet. Research has shown that this practice of noticing and then taking note of how you feel, it can give your well-being a little boost, even in the wintertime. And then to look a little bit as well at that consumption piece, or what you're taking into your body. Be mindful of your alcohol intake. Research shows that, especially in colder, darker areas, that we increase our alcohol intake. So be honest with yourself and ask for help if you need it. So I think if you pay attention and moderate some of those things, light and exercise, sleeping, eating, alcohol, that's going to help you cope through the winter months.
Before you go this morning, you're someone who always likes to look on the bright side. So leave us with what is the good news, so to speak, about winter.
Well, I mean, winter, I think, is a good opportunity to really get back to basics and support the skills that support your mental health all year long. I mean, recovery is what you do when it's hard. Recovery's easy when it's easy, if every day were summer, but you have to have 4 seasons of mental health, because the seasons are going to change, and whether you like it or not is optional. So on those days, I think, when you'd really rather not like it, I like to remember the solstice. We're already past that point in the year where the nights are starting to get shorter and the day is longer. It's perfectly okay to have a season in which we rest and digest, because each season has something new to offer and something new to look forward to.
All right. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Marcy.
Well put, hey? Rest and digest, Manitoba. Mark Hennick is our mental health columnist. Well, if you need a little music to do that, to relax, how about Just Ray's new song? It looks at staying present and avoiding those negative feelings. Here it is. It's called Golden Days.
I don't know anyone who runs like you to the place of ideas or something new. I was there once, and boy, I flew. Now I tread lightly with holes in
With Scott Regier. Hello.
Happy Blue Monday.
Yes, we're just talking about that. Let's start with tennis. So when it comes to sports, and the latest from the Australian Open today.
Was a clean set of tennis from Felix Auger-Aliassime.
Well, that's the sound, Marcy, of Felix Auger-Aliassime winning the opening set of his opening match in Melbourne this morning. The Montrealer went on to win another set and is now up a 2-1 on Dominic Thiem, the Austrian, who, of course, has won a Grand Slam in the past before, the U.S. Open back in 2020. So a positive development for Canada in men's singles, and the country could use a positive development because the other two singles players, Denis Shapovalov and Milos Raonic, both lost their opening matches this morning. Meanwhile, we have both Leila Fernandez and Rebecca Marino representing Canada in singles matches tomorrow. One of the bigger storylines, though, Marcy, in Melbourne is the return to the court of Naomi Osaka. She is a two-time winner of the Aussie Open in the past and has been away from the sport for close to 2 years now. Osaka was busy becoming a mom, and her 6-month-old daughter, Shay, who's back home in California, is clearly on her mind.
She's learning things while I'm gone, and I'm hoping she doesn't learn how to crawl, but she's doing her little plank thing and scooting forward and back, so I think it might be a little inevitable. I'm definitely sad, but I feel like it's a selfish sad because I want her to be here, but her whole environment is at home, you know what I mean? So I don't want to put her out of that while she's still so young. I FaceTime her often, though.
There you are, Naomi Osaka, who... It's kind of bittersweet. She's going to get to see Shay pretty quickly here because she lost her opening match just a short time ago against world number 16, Caroline Garcia.
From the heat of the Australian summer to the cold of our Canadian winter, a couple of streaks came to an end for our Winnipeg Jets over the weekend.
Yeah, the Jets, Marcy, were shut out 2-0 by Philadelphia Saturday. That snapped a franchise-best win and point streak. Head coach Rick Bowness said the loss came down to one thing.
We just didn't score. Simple as that. You're not going to score every night. Yeah, the goalie's pretty good. That kid was really good. Helly was fantastic. He kept us in the game in the second and gave us a chance to win the third. We just didn't get the puck behind him.
Still, one streak remains. The Jets have gone 12 games in a row, giving up 2 goals or fewer. And some other good news, Kyle Connor back practicing in a regular jersey. No word on if he'll be available this week. The Jets are back in action tomorrow night. They will be home to the New York Islanders.
Let's finish with an extraordinary hockey story from Newfoundland today.
This is quite something. The Newfoundland Growlers play in the East Coast Hockey League, so 2 tiers below the NHL. They're the Maple Leafs affiliate. And the Growlers were hit by a bad case of flu over the weekend, Marcy, and that left them scrambling and looking for players for their game on Sunday afternoon. So they gave a local guy who's a former first-round NHL pick, Terry Ryan, a call. Ryan answered the phone in a pub on Saturday night, where he admits he was 3 or 4 pints deep, couldn't believe he was being asked to play hockey again because the birthday he was celebrating was his 47th.
What?
Ryan told reporters the best part of playing was that his teenage daughter, Penny, finally got to see him.
My daughter was there. She just hadn't seen me ever play pro, and she's 13, and, I just wanted to go out there, and I didn't want to embarrass, man. And I just kept thinking about it. When she was born, my life just got so much better. And I just didn't see this coming. And, just look up and see her there and to hear the ovation. I never thought I'd hear that ovation again in my life.
Yeah, he heard a huge ovation when he got into a tussle in the third period, Terry Ryan. I wonder what his daughter thought of that. But there, if you weren't choking up listening to Naomi Osaka talk about her daughter, Terry Ryan and his daughter, that should have gotten you, I would think.
That was a great story. Wow, though. Can you even imagine?
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Scott. Talk to you tomorrow.
Yeah, you bet.
Scott Regehr with Morning Sports. Your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, we are still under an extreme cold warning In southern Manitoba, including Winnipeg, parts of the north, and in Churchill, it is a blizzard warning. In Winnipeg today, we'll have light snow, and around noon, that wind is going to pick up 40, gusting to 60 from the northwest, a high of -20 with a risk of frostbite. Right now, it is -24. Well, a water main break on McPhillips turned into an icy mess on the streets and flooded nearby restaurants yesterday. Water gushed into Burnout Vape Shop, as well as other businesses, including Sharma G Sweet House in a strip mall near McPhillips and Church. Manoj Sharma owns Sharma G Sweet House.
Water came from the back door, this door. The whole restaurant was flooded, like from kitchen and everything. So I don't know how long we're going to stay closed.
Sharma says the water was knee-high inside his restaurant, and it is bitterly cold. Imagine being without heat. But there is an outage in parts of western Manitoba that stretches from Newdale west to Strathclair, north to Oakburn and the Rossburn area, as well as Olha. About 1,000 homes and businesses are impacted. Power went out just before 6 this morning, and the expected restoration time ranges from 9 to 10 o'clock this morning. Former Premier Heather Stefanson says it has been an honor as she resigns today as PC party leader. Stefanson announced her departure at a delegation meeting over the weekend. She became Manitoba's first woman premier when Brian Pallister resigned in 2021. Stefanson says she is proud of the work she and her party did, but admits she faced challenges.
It's not easy. There's within the days of social media, and sometimes the mainstream media as well is not so kind, but that's okay. I respect that you're doing your jobs, and I have my job to do as well, and so I'll continue to get up every day and put one foot in front of the other and continue on.
No date has been set for a leadership convention to replace Stefanson, but the party set new rules for how the leader is selected using a point system that puts a cap on areas with large constituencies. Well, crews battled 2 house fires for several hours yesterday. One was in North Point Douglas in the upper level of a multi-family home on Grove Street. Everyone got out safely, but the fire and paramedic district chief says one firefighter was injured.
Because of the weather and the severity of the incident, we had up to 12 pieces of apparatus attending at any time. Multiple problems with frozen equipment and radios, and personnel working in the elements.
That's District Fire Chief Sinkowski. Crews also put out a fire in an empty house on Toronto Street. Newcomers looking to resettle in Canada may have higher odds of doing so in Manitoba soon if they already have family here. The NDP government is refocusing its provincial nominee program. It matches immigrants with labor needs in Manitoba. Now the program's giving priority to candidates who have close family connections in the province. Ryan Kuffner is president and CEO of Economic Development Winnipeg.
By doing both, we're not just attracting the talent we need to fill the skills gaps that we have, but we're also maximizing that retention piece, which is critically important when we bring people into the province.
Manitoba Labour Minister Malaya Marcelino says the nominee program will continue to primarily be an economic initiative. Well, it's not exactly kite-flying weather. Even so, dozens of families, caregivers, and their children braved bitter cold yesterday to fly kites at St. Vital Park in solidarity with Gaza. The ongoing war between Israel and Hamas reached the 100-day mark yesterday. Tariq Abdel Aziz says it can be difficult for children to understand the conflict.
I want them to stay in touch with this, but I also want them to see that there are other people who believe in what they, believe in and what we stand for. That's great. Not to feel isolated in this or not to feel that you're alone in this is really important.
The group Family Actions for Palestine hopes to create, quote, kid-centered events to provide learning opportunities for young people. You can find more news updated throughout the day. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
And thanks to the listeners. We got these photos coming in. Abby, we were asking, you're about to talk about the cold. We asked people to send us for our YouTube channel, because we're back on YouTube. Morning, everyone. Our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel online, to send us a photo that shows cold. That was our only instruction. And so we'll work to get those photos up on our channel. I've got one up on Facebook already, though. I love this. It shows a woman's face close up, and then you can clearly see the frosting on her bangs. She's got a toque on, but then her face is obstructed by two other noses that are leaning in from side to side muzzles. This is up on our channel now. You're probably seeing it. But it says, this is Cricket and Rose snuggling in. And you're probably listening thinking, oh, it's a picture of her and her dogs outside, but it's her and her horses. And I just love this. And you can see the frost on their muzzles as well. But what I love the most, Lynn Thacker Ty writing in, is that you're smiling in the photo. And that is more than half of getting through winter successfully. So thank you. Why don't you send us some photos as well if you're listening this morning? Show us the cold. You can email them, radio893@cbc.ca. That's probably the best way to reach us, radio893@cbc.ca. So let's talk about how cold with Abby Adeyemi.
Good morning once again. Right now in Winnipeg, it's minus 24 degrees with ice crystals, and we're still under that extreme cold warning that was issued by Environment Canada for southern Manitoba, and the extreme cold warning also and blizzard warning for northern Manitoba. Winnipeg currently at minus 24. The wind is still blowing from the west. Today, as we move through the day, the light snow will continue, and we will see a high of minus 17 degrees. Going to Brandon now. Brandon is currently at minus 25 degrees. Current condition there. You also have light snow also under that extreme cold warning. Today it's going to be a bit cloudy and then 60% chance of light snow later. That local wind is going to be blowing northwest, and you'll be seeing a high of minus 22. Thompson is currently at minus 25 with light snow. You'll be seeing a high of minus 24 today. Churchill is currently at minus 22 with the blowing snow and the blizzard warning. You should be seeing about 2 to 4 centimeters of snow, and your high for today is minus 18. And if we go over to the Interlake region, Gimli is currently at minus 23 with light snow, also under extreme cold warning. For today, you'll be seeing a high of minus 19. Morris in the Pembina Valley region, you are at minus 25 degrees, and you're heading to a high of minus 20. Right now, Winnipeg, we are at minus 24.
We were the last plane to fly into Churchill, myself and my producer, years ago when there was a blizzard up there.
How was it?
Well, all I remember is we were the last plane we landed. I was grateful we had an experienced pilot, no problem, but you couldn't see a thing because when especially when the wind whips off the bay, like we literally couldn't see Hudson Bay. And so it was like the next morning you still couldn't see a thing. You couldn't see across the street. We had to rely on locals to get us around. Did the show live from there. I had the same clothing for 3 days because my stuff got lost somewhere in transit. But yeah, but thank goodness for the local knowledge in that part of Manitoba. They're like, we've been through this, we got you, it's all right. But it was literally a whiteout. So be careful if you're in community this morning, for sure. Nolan Kaler, what's going on in the commute?
Nothing that drastic as far as blizzard driving conditions this morning, but a few things to let you know about. Heather Wells has been mentioning in her newscast that water main break that took place yesterday. McPhillips at Church repairs are beginning today, and already we're seeing some closures in that area already starting at Mountain. You're losing your northbound curb and your first middle lane, so keep far left to pass as you're making your way through that sort of 6-block stretch. We heard earlier about the collision at Confusion Corner. The southbound curb lane there remains blocked, but all other lanes are now open at Confusion Corner. As well, we've heard about Portage and Sherbrooke. Emergency vehicles are blocking the westbound curb and the first middle lane there. So keep right to pass as you're making your way through that intersection. That will certainly be causing some problems as we start to really ramp up the commute this morning. If you're seeing anything else out there on your drive, I've seen a few bikers out there this morning. Still no troikas, but we've got an hour left in the show. Here's hoping. Give us a call on the CBC commuter line, 204-788-3093.
All right, thank you.
You bet.
Let's get into continuing to talk about the cold from a different perspective. So there's no question it's been an odd winter this year. Remember, we started off with unseasonably mild temperatures. This cold's coming late to us. Our first major snowfall really just happened last week. For some people who grew up here and you spent your whole life in this city and in this province, it's just another winter peg. But if this is a newer home home for you. What has it been like navigating the unusual winter and when we get this extreme cold? Well, Estelle Vandenhever is with us. Estelle moved to Canada from South Africa last February. When she told people back home where she was going, they warned her that Winnipeg winters would be fierce. And although she says she knew what to expect, she says she didn't quite know what it would feel like until she got here. So she's got one winter under her belt, and this morning Estelle joins us by Zoom. Hi there.
Good morning.
So what did people tell you, like when you were preparing for what Winnipeg winter would be like? What did you think?
Well, obviously coming from South Africa, we have no idea of snow or anything like that. So we kind of relied, sounds silly, but we relied on what we see on the movies to kind of imagine what we would have experienced. And we got a lot of advice and just a lot of warning before we came, saying, it is cold. It is cold. Are you sure? It is cold.
I've done interviews over the years talking to people about this very same thing, and I'm not sure if it's was like this for you. The thing that can't be described, they say, is how the cold feels on your skin. Do you remember that? How do you describe it?
Yes, I think it was a shock to all our systems. Just this intense cold on our faces. Obviously, the rest of our body is covered up. So I can almost what you say, you feel it in your bones. It's so cold and yeah, it almost takes your breath away.
It's like a stinging feeling almost on a cold day.
Absolutely.
They don't show that in the movies. Everyone's walking around.
No, I think that's what I said to my husband. I was like, I don't remember seeing this part in the movies.
So your first winter here last February, what was it like? And I understand you also have a young child as well who's experiencing this. What was it like for them?
Well, my son was very excited. It was the first time that he had seen snow or experienced snow, so he was loving it. He enjoyed playing in the snow. And somebody lent us a sled for the first while that we were here, so he could sled down little hills. So that's been fun, and since then we've acquired a sled of our own. So he loves the sledding to school and home after school. We haven't quite mastered ice skating yet. We want to do that as a family because I think that could be a fun outdoor activity as well.
You mentioned what the lack of snow in South Africa, but how does the temperature, the cold, compare to weather in Cape Town?
Well, to give you an example, in the fall, earlier in the fall this year, last year, there were about 2 weeks maybe, which were quite cold for us. And we were sort of saying, oh my goodness, this is like a South African winter for us. What are we going to experience in winter? So yeah, this extreme icy cold is something very foreign to us. Obviously no snow, no ice, nothing like that. So we would just have a wind and rain. And it would be a cold winter's day.
Everyone here this year is talking about, many people around town this year are talking about the fact that we started a lot warmer than we used to. What do you think when you hear other people talking about how nice it's been?
I'm grateful, first of all. I think we say thank goodness. And looking at the weather that we had this past week versus the weather that we had leading up to this week, I can completely understand that reasoning that it has been warm up until now, and everything we kind of find as we go along we're gaining a different perspective. So maybe at the very beginning of winter when it was -5, we were saying, oh, it's so cold when we go outside. Now if there's a -5, we walk outside and we say, oh, it's a lovely day, look. So very quickly our perceptions have changed.
That's the Manitoba. That's the Manitoban in you now, because you've been here. It's your second winter. What do you wish you'd known before coming to Canada? I mean, people talk to you about what the cold will be like, but what do you wish you'd known? I'm just curious.
I think for us, we had no idea about the slush when you're walking in the paths or you're walking somewhere, the slush that sort of develops, or the slipperiness of the sidewalks. That was very, very unexpected to us. So, yeah, I think that was totally new.
What advice would you give to someone about how to get through it and what's most important on these in this cold winter?
Well, I think definitely getting the right gear. We made sure that we got decent thermal undergarments, decent winter jackets, coats, even things to cover our faces. And then somebody taught us while we were here that mittens are more effective than gloves. So that was a tip that we picked up over here, which we never knew. So I would say go for good quality mittens as well. And then I think, obviously, just to embrace the winter. That's what we're trying to do as a family as well, just to make sure that you're equipped well so that you can enjoy it and embrace it.
The mitten advice is still every year is my favorite advice. It's so true because you can move your fingers in there, right? They have some movement instead of the gloves. Yeah. Well, I hope your 7-year-old enjoys the rest of the winter and more snow comes that he can play in, and maybe that skating will be on. Maybe learning to skate will be one of the things this year. We'll see for your family.
I hope so. Thank you so much, Elsie.
Yeah, thank you very much, Estelle. Nice to see you over Zoom, and happy winter. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. That's Estelle Vandenhever with us via Zoom this morning. Fairly new to Winnipeg. Last winter was her first. She's originally from South Africa. If you have a story to share, your best advice about the cold, we do have an extreme cold warning out this morning in Winnipeg. You can always call us, 788-3205.
Do you have ideas on how CBC can become more accessible? Well, we want to hear from you. How can CBC become a barrier-free public broadcaster for people living with disabilities? We'd like to invite you to share your ideas with us by registering for our public consultations at cbc.radio-canada.ca/accessibility. With your help, we can make CBC more accessible for all.
Well, speaking of the cold, I apologize. I neglected to mention this this half hour yet, but in Fort LaBosse, the division has buses not running and schools closed today. So that is because of poor road conditions. So in Fort LaBosse School Division, schools are closed today and no buses. That's because of poor road conditions. I did mention the extreme cold warning for Winnipeg. Churchill's under a blizzard warning. Extreme cold warning for Lynn Lake. By the way, that extreme cold for the southern part of the province is not just Winnipeg. It is most of the south. So Steinbach, Selkirk, Dugald, over to Portage, over to Brandon included in this. So is Dauphin, Minnedosa, St. Rose. So a lot of the south is included in this extreme cold, and basically it means that on exposed skin the wind chills could feel like -50. So it's the real stuff we're into now. Right now, ice crystals -24. In case you're wondering about the daytime high in Winnipeg, we're going to be right around -20, and we have had just some light snow this morning. Really nice wintry sky out there, though. It's that moody blue behind some light cloud. Coming up after 8 o'clock on the program, we're going to hear from Indigenous Services Minister Patty Hajdu. She's going to talk about the proposed First Nations Clean Water Act that came out federally. A lot of First Nation communities not happy with what's in it. We'll hear from her and challenge her on that a little bit as well. So that's coming up after 8. Right now, though, for some members in the University of Manitoba's Black student body specifically, the New Year's Eve death of a fellow student still feels fresh. Afolabi Stephen Opaso was an international student from Nigeria, and as you likely now know, he was shot and killed by police. A vigil was held last Friday. Police say he was armed with 2 knives when they arrived at the University Crescent apartment. His family's lawyer says he was experiencing a mental health episode that day. For some students and members of the larger community, his death has become a site of grief and trauma. Monica Williams is a professor in the University of Ottawa's clinical psychology program. She's also the Canada Research Chair in Mental Health Disparities. She says experiences of racial trauma are normal when events like this happen. And to talk about the impact, she's with us. Good morning.
Good morning.
How, for those listeners that aren't sort of, fully understanding what this is, when you talk about racial trauma, what are you talking about?
Well, it can be most easily explained as a type of traumatic reaction or even PTSD that happens as a result of racism or multiple racist experiences. And it can be a combination of racist experiences from individuals, but it can also be from community traumas as well.
Who experiences it?
People of color who experience racism can experience racial trauma if they have enough experiences of racism.
I've also read that communities can experience it. Can you elaborate on that?
Absolutely. So, for example, in this situation where we see, the tragic death of, a young Black man, well, that's a signal to the whole community, to the Black community, that Black people aren't safe. The police were called for a safety and wellness check for this young man. And instead, not only was he not kept safe, he was harmed and he was killed. And that's a signal to everyone, all the Black people in the community, that our community is not safe.
How does racial trauma differ from other forms of trauma?
Well, often when we think about PTSD, for example, we think maybe about a single incident that traumatized a person, whereas racism, it's happening all the time. And when you're a person of color, you never know when it's going to happen. You never know how bad it's going to be. And so it's different in the sense that not only is it happening all the time, but also the majority, most white people don't see it happening. And they don't understand how it impacts people of color. And it can be hard to talk about it. And it can be hard to get support and acceptance. And it can be hard to find clinicians and therapists who can help people when they're suffering from racial trauma.
Do people dismiss it? What's a misconception about racial trauma that you find people have?
Well, I find that most clinicians realize that it's an actual problem that needs to be addressed, but they just don't have the training to know how to do it. And they feel very awkward and uncomfortable even talking about racial issues, so they're not effective in helping people who have it.
You're talking about white clinicians, I'm guessing.
Mostly white clinicians, but not always, because you know what? Clinicians of color, we get the same training white clinicians get, and usually it doesn't cover things like racial trauma.
So what's the need to improve the training then, in your view?
In my view, first of all, every clinician, every mental health professional, every health professional should understand bias. They should understand the problems that people of color experience, and they should do their own anti-racism work. But it's not just clinicians, also law enforcement, even more important, because they're the ones running around with guns.
How does racial trauma actually manifest? Like, what might someone notice in a friend or loved one?
Well, the most common symptom I see is depression. People become sad, they become withdrawn, they feel hopeless, but they also may feel very anxious too and worried. They may not want to go out, they may be afraid of experiencing racism out in public, and they may have nightmares about it. Sometimes people even have physical symptoms, like it's very common for people to have hair loss, actually, as a result of stress from racism.
How else can we better address how we treat racial trauma nationally, like even across Canada, in your view?
Well, first of all, we do need to prioritize, first of all, more mental health professionals. We don't have enough anywhere in Canada. More mental health professionals of color and better training for all mental health professionals. That includes how to work effectively with people of color who have trauma, particularly racial trauma.
An event like the death of Afolabi Opaso can be re-traumatizing, as you've outlined, for some in community. When you look at who may be most affected, this may be an obvious answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Would it be someone also of a similar age? And we were talking about the fact that he was an international student. Like, would the depth of somebody, feeling that re-traumatization be higher in people who were really directly similar in those ways, age and background to this young man?
Yes, absolutely. I can tell you, particularly, young Black men in that community are going to be especially anxious and upset about it. But also, for example, Black women who may have sons that age, they're going to be worried about their children because of this. Because when you see a young man like that killed, you're like, well, that could be my child. And I know I've had that thought too when I've heard of young Black men being harmed by police officers. I worry for my own sons.
We've actually had interviews in the last couple of weeks, about exactly those two things, connecting a young Black man in community, actually with a former police chief, to have a conversation about the way forward and trust and fear and loss and trauma, and then also with the mother, as you said, who echoed exactly what you stated, that fear then for her own kids comes bubbling up to the surface.
Right. And there's a lack of transparency because law enforcement, they need to give us more information about what happened. And by hiding so many details, that just totally erodes trust.
How can members of the community who might be experiencing racial trauma then start to heal, knowing that there's so many gaps in sort of people that can deal with this?
Well, there's several steps to healing. The first is to make sure that you have the social support that you need, people that you can talk to who really get it, who are going to believe you and understand you and support you. And the next step is to work with your traumatic experiences and process them, talking about them with a friend or a therapist or a counselor or a spiritual counselor to help make sense of it. And then the last step is activism, and that means working for change in your community so that problems and experiences like this will really make a difference for the next person who maybe won't have to be shot by police when they need a wellness check.
Monica, thank you very much for being with us this morning. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Monica Williams is Canada Research Chair in Mental Health Disparities. She's also a professor of clinical psychology at the University of Ottawa. If you want to read more about where the case is at and the investigation in the shooting death of Afolabi Stephen Opaso, please go to the stories on our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba, and you can read more about the developments. Late last week, the IIU here talking about the fact that this is going to go to Alberta to be investigated because of a connection that was discovered between one of the officers involved in the shooting. So you can read that update and more online. It's 3 minutes right now to 8 o'clock on 89.3. It's time to go to Heather Wells for more news and headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, bitter morning to be without power, but we are learning now some places like Rossman Lake are starting to see power restored. Parts of western Manitoba, though, have been without power since about 6 o'clock this morning. Bruce Owen at Manitoba Hydro says the outage stretches from Newdale to Strathclair, Oakburn and Olha, as well as the Rossburn area. So we'll hear more about that. Not exactly kite flying weather, but that's just what dozens of families, caregivers and their children did, braving bitter cold yesterday to fly kites at St. Vital Park in solidarity with Gaza. We'll hear more about that in our next local news coming up at 8:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Kev Robert sending in a gorgeous photo. We asked you to take a picture and show us the cold. And he writes, Sun Dogs, Burger and Cass. That's the name of his dogs. But the backdrop is just this bright, cold sun coming up. They're bundled in their sled dog jackets. Keep on moving, he says. Just keep on moving. And that is the key to staying warm out there. So thank you for the photos. Radio 893 at cbc.ca or post on Facebook. We'll get them up on the YouTube channel and bundle up together. It is minus 24 ice crystals in Winnipeg and an extreme cold warning issued for most of southern Manitoba. 788-3093 if you see any problem in traffic. Nolan had mentioned Portage at Sherbrooke. Could be cleared now, but there have been emergency vehicles blocking some of the lanes there. So Portage at Sherbrooke. That could be clear now. 788-3093 if you need us. Coming up after 8 o'clock on the program, we're going to have a conversation with the Federal Indigenous Services Minister, Patty Haidu, about the proposed First Nations Clean Water Act and what it could mean for First Nations communities here in Manitoba. So stay tuned. That's coming up after 8. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team here at Information Radio. Stay with us. World Report's next on 89.3.
On Cue with Tom Power. Vanessa Morgan stars in the new series Wild Cards, and Vanessa will be here to tell you about the joy of playing a fast-talking grifter on the show.
That's insulting. I'm hardly predictable.
And what it's like to say goodbye to her long-running role on the hit TV show Riverdale.
You want me back in the Serpents? Make me queen.
That's coming up on Cue, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current
with Matt Galloway.
It's called living on the lights. The job of a lighthouse keeper seems like something from past centuries, but there are people in Canada who still do that job. The life of a modern-day lighthouse keeper coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning from CBC News. I'm Marcia Young. Voters in Iowa head to the polls this evening to choose their Republican candidate for president. The Iowa caucuses will lay the groundwork for the months-long presidential primary process. Recent polls suggest former President Donald Trump is in the lead despite his ongoing legal battles. The CBC's Richard Madden is in Washington. And Richard, what are we expecting heading into tonight's vote?
Yeah, I think it's safe to say we can expect some surprises. Turnout is the ball game, and Iowa's digging out of a major blizzard and some of the coldest temperatures on record. So if voters stay home or can't get to the caucus meeting, that could have a huge impact on the results. As you noted, polls suggest former President Donald Trump is the party's clear frontrunner. He's up by some 30 points. But in the past few weeks, former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley has been surging, vaulting to a distant second ahead of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who's now in third. Now, none of these candidates differ much on policy. It's clear they're following Trump's lead on immigration, border, and culture wars. But the big challenge here is the weather. Take a listen to this unusual pitch by Donald Trump.
You can't sit home. If you're sick as a dog, you say, darling, I gotta make it. Even if you vote and then pass away, it's worth it, remember?
So what could tonight's results mean for the election going forward?
Yeah, it's all about momentum. If the polls are correct, Trump is poised to win Iowa, but if he gets less than 50% support, then his rivals can make their case. There's appetite for change in the party. But a lot of pressure is on Ron DeSantis. He put all his eggs in the Iowa basket, so he needs a very strong showing, a clear second-place finish, or else that would signal his campaign is stalling. Nikki Haley has a bit more breathing room. She appears to have solid support in the next contest, the New Hampshire primary. That could carry her into South Carolina, her home state. But if she loses there to Trump, it's pretty much game over. Trump would likely go on to become the eventual Republican nominee.
All right. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
This CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. An inquest into one of the worst mass stabbings in Canadian history begins today. Many in James Smith Cree Nation hope it will answer how Miles Sanderson was free to commit violence in September 2022. 11 people were killed. 17 others were injured in central Saskatchewan. The province's chief coroner, Clive Wayhill, says the inquest is designed to prevent future tragedies.
An inquest is not to have blame on anybody in the first place. It doesn't find fault. It's there to find, can we find something that would prevent this from happening in the future? So let's honor the people that passed away. Let's have their story told.
The inquest is scheduled to last 2 weeks. Another, looking into how Sanderson died in police custody, is scheduled for next month. In the Middle East, there is still no word on 3 hostages being held by Hamas. They were the subject of a video released by Hamas yesterday. It said it would advise on their fate today. Meanwhile, Western nations are keeping an eye on Yemen. Abby Kodassan has more.
The U.S. says it shot down a cruise missile heading for one of its destroyers in the Red Sea on Sunday. The Iranian-backed Houthis have been attacking merchant ships they say are linked to Israel in recent months, saying they won't stop until the IDF stops attacking Gaza. Just a few days ago, the U.S. and U.K. conducted joint airstrikes on Houthi targets in Yemen. Neither Congress nor the British Parliament had approved the move. UK Defense Secretary Grant Shapps.
We are now assessing what difference that will make and very much hope that a clear message has been sent.
12% of all global trade goes through the Suez Canal, and some shipping companies have been forced to divert their cargo at great cost.
All help and all support is highly appreciated.
Niels Haupt is with the German shipping company Hapag-Lloyd.
For the moment, we don't deem the passage through the Red Sea and the Suez Canal safe.
Canada provided logistical support for the American-British airstrikes last week. Ottawa also signed a joint statement supporting the operation with several other nations, including South Korea and Germany. France, Spain, and Italy refused to take part in the military operation. Abby Kodassan, CBC News, Berlin.
Police in central Israel are investigating a suspected ramming attack. At least 13 people have been injured in Ra'anana, just north of Tel Aviv. Reuters says a Palestinian man stole a car and started ramming people. Israeli media are also reporting some people have been stabbed. The suspect is in custody, and police say they are investigating his motivations. Guatemala's new president has officially taken office.
Presidente de la República de Guatemala para el periodo constitucional.
Bernardo Arevalo was sworn in just minutes after midnight. Months of disruptions delayed his inauguration. Arevalo had been elected in August on a promise to stamp out corruption and restore democracy, but he faced challenges from lawmakers who were loyal to outgoing President Alejandro Giammattei, and there were last-minute efforts by congressional opponents to prevent his inauguration. Analysts are suggesting this could be the year the world slows the burning of coal to make electricity. But right now, global consumption is near an all-time high, and researchers have been wrong in the past to write off the world's reliance on coal. Business reporter Kyle Bax explains.
We actually are predicting peak coal.
Natalie Biggs says the moment is here. She's an analyst with research firm Wood Mackenzie. She says global demand for coal is expected to peak in 2024 before beginning to fall. Coal is the dirtiest, most polluting fossil fuel, but it has proven difficult for the world to turn its back on the stalwart source of electricity.
Coal just has a lot of staying power.
Wood Mackenzie has made such a prediction before, back in 2013. Since then, construction of new coal power plants has continued.
So that's really where the problem lies and why it's hard to determine peak coal, because there's this huge pipeline of coal projects in China, India, and Southeast Asia that is going to continue on.
Higher consumption of coal in those parts of the world has offset the declines in North America and Europe. China is the biggest user of coal in the world. Paul McConnell is an analyst with S&P Global Commodity Insights.
We do obviously recognize that China's building new coal-fired power plants, but those plants are much more efficient than the plants that they're replacing.
He isn't sure exactly when global use will reach an inflection point. Regardless, he also says demand should soon start to fall. Kyle Bax, CBC News, Calgary.
Roughly 12 million Canadians will be getting federal carbon tax rebates today. The payments are quarterly, and they go out to every tax-filing adult household in provinces where the federal carbon tax applies. That means people in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, and the Atlantic provinces should be receiving money anywhere from $120 to $425, depending on the size of your household. Marbled crayfish are disrupting ecosystems around the world. Now they've been identified for the first time in North America. The species reproduces by cloning itself. Justin Chandler reports that experts in Ontario are working to stop its spread.
The floodgates open, and they were crawling on land. They were captured by the groundskeeper.
That's Brooke Schreier of the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters, describing how his team confirmed the existence of marbled crayfish in Burlington, Ontario.
Many people are usually caught off guard when they see a crayfish walking on land.
These lobster-like creatures grow as long as 7 centimeters, and like their name, have a marble pattern on their body.
They don't do much, but they can survive the winter.
Biologist Premick Hammer helped identify the crayfish in July.
Crayfish, if one survives, then boom, you're going to have 200 pretty soon.
He says it's a threat to Ontario because it can outcompete native crayfish, alter the food chain, and spread disease. Now at a city park, workers drain the ponds and are hoping winter temperatures kill any crayfish who remain.
And what I suspect happened was somebody had heard about the regulations that were coming in, that they might have felt the pressure to get rid of these crayfish. They chose to release them in the parks, and that's never the correct option.
This month, Ontario banned more species of crayfish, in a move Schreier and Hammer say will make it easier to stop invasives. And while they think the Burlington crayfish is contained to one area, their work isn't done. They say the species was recently detected in Nova Scotia. Justin Chandler, CBC News, Hamilton.
A hit television series shot in Alberta is a top contender at tonight's Emmy Awards. The Last of Us is up for 24 Emmy Awards, including Best Actor and Actress for stars Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey. If Pascal wins for his role in that series, he will be the first Latino to win Best Actor in a drama. But the series Succession leads the pack with 27 nominations in total, and The White Lotus has 5 women competing for Best Supporting Actress in a Drama. Tonight's ceremony is being held after a 4-month delay caused by the Hollywood actor and writer strikes. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
So make sure that you are bundled up. You likely know already, Winnipeg. In fact, across Manitoba, lots of extreme cold warnings. Thanks for joining us. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM, or on the app or YouTube today. Appreciate having you along. Speaking of YouTube, check out some pictures that are coming in. People sending us pictures of what cold looks like. So some snow and frost on the muzzles of your animals out there for sure. This half hour on the program, Indigenous Services Minister Patty Hajdu, the federal minister, is in Winnipeg today. She'll talk to us this half hour about the proposed First Nations Clean Water Act and what it could mean for First Nations communities here in Manitoba. There has been criticism of this. 2 groups representing more than 100 First Nations in Manitoba and other provinces told CBC News they can't support the bill. They say it's too lax. We'll talk about it. So stay with us. The federal minister giving us some time here this morning. Right now, 8:11, and Heather Wells is here with a news update. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, filled to the brim at one of Winnipeg's pop-up shelters. Over the weekend, Marion Willis at Street Link says they had 43 people needing shelter from the cold, and they managed to find longer-term housing for 11 of those people. She says they need to have things that they don't currently have. When they talk about longer-term housing, she says they're desperate for things like bedding and furniture. So we're going to hear more from Marion Willis coming up. And former Premier Heather Stephenson says it has been an honor as she resigns today as PC party leader. Stephenson became Manitoba's first woman premier when Brian Pallister resigned in 2021, and she says she is proud of the work she and her party did. We'll hear more in our next local news at 8:30.
All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, getting into the details of this cold day, here's Abby Adiemi.
Good morning once again. We are still under that extreme cold warning in southern Manitoba, including Winnipeg, parts of the north, and in Churchill, it's a blizzard warning. In Winnipeg today, we will be having light snow around noon, and the wind is going to be peaking up 40 gusts and up to 60 from the northwest. We're looking at a high of -20 with a risk of frostbite today. And if we look ahead to tomorrow, we will see another chilly day with periods of light snow. Right now in Winnipeg, it is -24.
Thank you, Abby.
You're welcome.
Let's get to the commute then. We've had a couple things going on this morning. Not too bad, Nolan Kaler?
Not too bad, but still certainly some things to watch out for this morning as you're making your way around the city of Winnipeg. For one thing, there was the water main break that took place yesterday at McPhillips at Church Avenue. Repairs are beginning today, and already we're seeing some lane closures because of that, already starting about 5 or 6 blocks south of that at Mountain. So you're losing your northbound curb and your first middle lane. So you have to keep far left to get around that as crews attend to that water main break. We also got a call from Christie, the westbound perimeter highway between St. Mary's and Pembina, as you're going on the bridge over the river. A truck has crashed into the railing, so you have to take care to get around that as well this morning. Southbound curb lane, Confusion Corner, may still be blocked because of a collision that occurred just over an hour ago. Other than that, all lanes are open at Confusion Corner. And just before we went to World Report, Marcy was mentioning the emergency vehicles blocking the westbound curb lane at Portage and Sherbrooke. Those emergency vehicles have now cleared, so you're smooth sailing through that part of the West End. If you see anything else in the final half hour of Information Radio, give us a call on the CBC commuter line. The number is 204-788-3093.
Well, as we mentioned, a new bill aiming to ensure Canada's First Nations have safe drinking water is receiving mixed reviews. The First Nations Clean Water Act was introduced to the House of Commons last month. The bill has received some criticism, though, from First Nations groups across the country who say they weren't consulted during the creation of the bill. And in Manitoba, some are concerned that the bill uses the term best efforts, quote unquote, to describe the government's obligation to ensure access to safe drinking water and funding. And some are saying that there's a lot of infrastructure that has to be in place to make clean drinking water a reality, including here in communities in Manitoba. We heard from Pimichikamak Cree Nation Chief David Monius spoke to CBC. And in Manitoba, there's a group that is partnered with another province. They represent more than 100 First Nations, telling CBC they can't support the bill. They think it's too lax. So Patty Hajdu is in Winnipeg today to talk more about the bill and to communicate with different communities. She is the Federal Minister of Indigenous Services, and she does join us from the city, where she's already here in our cold city this morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy.
So tell us first, before we get into the criticisms and the concerns that I mentioned, what you hope this new legislation will mean for First Nations communities, specifically here in Manitoba, but also, I guess, across Canada.
Well, this is historic legislation that was developed with extensive consultation of First Nations, indeed co-drafted with the AFN and other communities that had experienced long-term boil water advisories for a very long time. And so I'm, first of all, very grateful for everyone that's participated in feeding into this legislation. It's been a long process. We've consulted for well over 2 years. All First Nations chiefs have received multiple drafts of the proposed legislation. And of course, it is about moving forward, never finding ourselves again in the place that we found ourselves in 2015, where, we had well over 150 long-term boil water advisories, many First Nations struggling with access to clean water, and importantly, no tools not only to continue to provide clean water on First Nations, but to protect the water that fed their water systems. And this bill begins to address those systemic failures.
So to those that say that there wasn't enough consultation, what would you say specifically to them? You've outlined what consultation there was, but what would your response be to that?
Well, I'm here today to hear about the concerns. Specifically, I'll be meeting with the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, with Grand Chief Merrick, and I'll be meeting with the Kuwait Tribal Council. In the next couple days, I'll be meeting with representatives from treaties 6, 7, and 8 to hear about what their thoughts are on the bill. And I would say that this is an ongoing iterative process. The commitment I've made to all of the co-developers, including the group of First Nations that actually began the historic litigation that resulted in a historic compensation package, is that we're open to listening, and there are many ways that the bill can receive input through these types of ongoing consultations, through the parliamentary committee process, and certainly we'll have a lot to think about as we move this legislation through the House.
As you heard, the language used by this group of 100, more than 100 First Nations, many from Manitoba, one of the concerns is that the language in the bill is too lax, is their terminology. So I guess the concern about that is that the lack of support for the bill at this stage, the worry is that communities will be on the hook for problems with water treatment, because the bill uses the term, as I mentioned, best efforts to describe the obligation. And so without that more firm language, we will do this, we will spend this, you will not be on the hook. Will you get that specific? Is there room for this bill to be rewritten in a more specific way?
Well, best efforts is actually a legal term. I had those same questions actually as the minister when the bill was being drafted. And what I was reassured by was that best efforts is pretty high bar for the federal government. It's the federal government, as you know, has a high degree of fiscal power to be able to do many things simultaneously. And so this bill will actually commit the government to invest in what's needed in water infrastructure, so that we never go back to those days of seeing cuts that we saw through, for example, example, the Harper Conservatives that led to those long-term boil water advisories. Since we've been in office in 2015, as you know, we've lifted with First Nations, over 100 long-term boil water advisories. We've, reinvested in First Nations capacity through operator training, and importantly, we've provided sufficient funding to First Nations to have equitable salaries for water operators on First Nations. And those kinds of things will continue and would be considered best efforts. I understand why there's no trust, though, let me tell you, Marcy, because having been the Minister of Indigenous Services for 2 years and having grown up in Northern Ontario, there is a deep fear that the federal government will not be a good partner. And this legislation is exactly addressed to do that, to commit the federal government in law to equity, to commit the federal government in law to tools that will help First Nations protect the water that serves their communities.
Tools or funds? Is that sort of where, I appreciate what you're saying about the language and best efforts and where you've moved to address these issues, is really what people are calling for, is that specific, we're going to give you tens of thousands of dollars to build this specific thing in this community. Why isn't the language that specific in the bill?
Because the needs will be co-developed with First Nations. So it would have been a rather presumptuous for the federal government to arbitrarily choose a number to put in legislation that would potentially become stale almost immediately. So there is language in the legislation that the funding formulas will also be co-developed with First Nations, so that First Nations will have input into what is sufficient funding. How should the funding change over time? How do you peg the increased costs over time? And how do you make sure that First Nations are not left behind? And so the bill addresses those very concerns, that the funds need to be reflective of the actual cost of delivering clean water, that they need to be not arbitrarily chosen by the federal government, but rather co-developed as well with First Nations. And so I consider that a massive tool, as well as the legal tools that will be created, co-developed with provinces, territories, and First Nations to protect source water. This is indeed historic. It's the first piece of legislation that's ever been so deeply co-developed or deeply co-drafted even with First Nations. And I understand, as I said, the anxiety. And I also think that the government is very open to hearing suggestions for amendments that could strengthen the legislation.
How is it different, Minister Hajdu? I should mention 8:21 a.m. Patty Hajdu, the Federal Minister of Indigenous Services, on with CBC Manitoba. She's in town today to talk all about this bill with communities. How is it different from the Safe Drinking Water for First Nations Act of 2013?
Well, that piece of legislation was roundly despised by First Nations people. It was imposed by the Harper Conservatives, of which, by the way, the current leader was a member of cabinet at the time. And it was done hastily with no consultation. And immediately, even before it passed the House, First Nations were asking for it to be repealed. It was toothless, it was paternalistic, and it did not at all consider the kinds of things that our legislation considers, including, by the way, the historic efforts to protect source water, but also the ongoing commitment to equitable resources and supports for First Nations to continue this essential work. So, in fact, as part of Budget 2022, I believe, or 2023, we repealed that legislation at the request of First Nations. They said it was toothless, it was useless, and they didn't want it on the books. So that piece of work has been done. That law is repealed. And this is the replacement legislation that I said has had extensive feedback and input from First Nations. And I'm looking forward to those ongoing conversations with chiefs and grand chiefs and tribal councils across the country to make sure that it is as strong as we possibly can get it, so that we never find ourselves in this situation again.
Is it premature for me to ask you about a timeline? If someone is sitting in a community without clean drinking water right now, when they might see those the funding or support, when that's going to move? What's the timeline?
Well, what I would say is all remaining 28 long-term drinking water advisories have a work plan. And in fact, each community's work plan and state of work is on the website at the Government of Canada. And you can find it, you can search it up by First Nation, you can look at where communities are at. The majority of communities are either in construction or waiting for the confidence of chief and council through their members to lift that long-term boil water advisory. And there are only a couple that are still in the feasibility feasibility stage, and those couple that are still in the sort of the feasibility stage are in southern Ontario, where they have vast geographical spaces to serve and some really challenging situations in terms of the infrastructure. But people can follow along. And this legislation, as I said, is another tool to make sure that the ongoing commitment by the federal government with the adequacy of funding, with the supports for ongoing protection of source water is there, so that we don't find ourselves in a place where communities, like Tatasquik, for example, have live with poisoned water in their neighborhood.
I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you while you're in Manitoba, and we've talked about this issue before, but this has to do with Peguis First Nation and their flood in 2022, destroying homes, displacing residents, 1,000 residents. Any updates while you're in Winnipeg today to share with us, or plans from the federal government, your government, for permanent flood protection for Peguis First Nation? We're coming up on 2 years of people being out of their homes this spring.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that is work that continues, and it's been a really challenging road for Peguis. And first, I have to say my heart is with Peguis First Nations members who have been evacuated in some cases for a very long time. In 2022, for example, the number of evacuees, many of them, 500 people, are still out of their homes. And, for the average person who's never experienced evacuation as a result of a flood, I can tell you this is, and I'm sure you've heard from Peguis members, this is a very disorienting situation. We have, for example, we have $2.5 million advance payment to get ready for this year's flooding situation. I know that the Premier and I will be meeting very shortly. I'll be raising with him the need to work quickly with Peguis, and I know that he's brand new, but I also know he's very familiar with the situation of Peguis, and we need to work together with the province of Manitoba, with Peguis themselves, and of course Indigenous Services Canada will be there to be a strong partner, both financially and from the perspective of supports for First Nations peoples that are so impacted.
Is permanent flood protection in the conversation at this stage, yes or no?
Yes, it is. And in fact, I've been very clear with the previous chief and certainly with the community that we need to sit down together with the province to talk about permanent flood protection. As I said, there is already $2.5 million ready for flood preparation for the spring. And we're working with the First Nation to make sure that we know exactly what's needed. But you're absolutely right. This is an ongoing every year situation, and it's really frustrating for the community. They take one step forward. They take, houses are repaired. It's expensive, as you know, for flood response and recovery. We've invested tens of millions of dollars in housing repairs and building new infrastructure, only to see some of that damaged year after year. And so that's not sustainable. I think the new chief, Chief Bird, signed the memorandum of understanding with the federal government that will continue to work not just on the short-term needs, but the long-term needs of Peguis. And I'm looking forward to working with both Chief Bird and the Premier on what we can do for a permanent solution to this ongoing flooding disaster.
Minister, thank you for giving us so much time this morning. We appreciate it while you're here in Winnipeg. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcy.
That's Patty Hajdu, the Federal Minister of Indigenous Services, with us via Zoom this morning on CBC's Information Radio. She is in Winnipeg today. She heard she'll be meeting with the Premier. She will also be meeting with Indigenous leaders from different communities to talk about the new bill around clean water.
Whether it's breaking news from around the world, across the country, or in your own hometown, it's all at your fingertips on the CBC News app. Get the top stories from where you live under the local tab, or watch video clips, live events, and the national on your smartphone or tablet. Get all the news you want, when you want it, where you want it, with the CBC News app. Download the app for free today.
It is 8:28 a.m. We've got local news coming up at 8:30. It's minus 24, ice crystals, extreme cold, and a lot of things developing in traffic. Nolan?
Plenty to talk about in traffic. We're hearing about reduced highway visibility on several Manitoba highways, including number 5 around Dauphin this morning and the number 10 highway around the Pas, number 6 going up north as well as Highway 60. So take care as you're traveling in that central northwestern part of Manitoba on Manitoba highways today. Also, new in the city of Winnipeg, Keniston at Sterling Lyon, a stall in the northbound curb lane. Keep left to get past that. And westbound perimeter between St. Mary's and Pembina as you're going over the river. Truck has crashed into the railing, so do take care to get around that. Anything else in the final few minutes of Information Radio, give us a call on the CBC commuter line 204-788-3093.
All right, thank you very much, Nolan.
Of course.
Active weather out there. Fort LaBosse School Division, I'm sure you know by now, but they are closed today. No school, no buses running. Extreme cold warning extends across the south, does include Winnipeg, Steinbach, Brandon, Dauphin, up to Minnedosa. A blizzard warning, if you look at Churchill this morning, there's a blizzard warning specific to Churchill and York. And extreme cold, while not everywhere in the north, is affecting Lynn Lake, Leaf Rapids, and Puck. So take care in all of those places. Woo! Monday, mid-January, and here is winter. 788-3093, as mentioned, if you have anything to add to Nolan's big list of traffic issues. Stay with us after the news because the Current today is going to be looking at a job that you might think doesn't exist anymore. Lighthouse keeper. That's after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, we have some drifting snow in Winnipeg. It's minus 24 right now. Our high today is minus 20 with a risk of frostbite. And as you heard from Marcy, we do have that extreme cold warning for Winnipeg, all of southern Manitoba, parts of the north, and a blizzard warning for Churchill today. Dangerous Cold had a pop-up shelter in Winnipeg filled to capacity all weekend with people trying to stay warm. Marion Willis at St. Boniface Street Link says the shelter at 604 St. Mary's Road had 46 people looking for help. The facility only has beds for 26. Willis says they're seeing more people who aren't considered chronically homeless. Some have lost their jobs and homes since the pandemic. Willis says her group is trying a new approach to help.
We've decided we're going to house directly from shelter and try to prevent as many people as possible from exiting our shelter back into homelessness. So we've been able to secure housing for 11.
Willis says they are desperate, though, for furniture and household items like dishes and towels and bedding for people who are moving into more permanent homes. Anyone with donations can take them to 604 St. Mary's Road. A water main break on McPhillips turned into an icy mess on the streets, flooding nearby businesses yesterday. Water gushed into Burnout Vape Shop, Sharma G Sweet House, and other businesses at a mall near McPhillips and Church. Manoj Sharma owns Sharma G Sweet House and says the water was knee-high.
The water came from the back door, this door. The whole restaurant was flooded, like from kitchen and everything, so I don't know how long we're going to stay closed.
And Sharma's not alone. Both McRae Animal Hospital and Subway are also still closed. Well, here's some welcome news. Power is starting to come back for people in parts of western Manitoba. Bruce Owen at Manitoba Hydro says outages began around 6 this morning in places like Cardale, Strathclair, north to Oakburn. Slightly more than 1,000 homes and businesses have been affected, but we are learning now that power is slowly starting to come back on. Abi Khan isn't ruling out a PC leadership run. Heather Stephenson, who has held the job since Brian Pallister resigned in 2021, is resigning herself today. Khan says more than 300 delegates to the party's delegation meeting Saturday shared what they want for the province moving forward.
Resoundingly, I think everyone in that room heard that they want a party that is more reflective of Manitoba. They want a party that is more reflective of the changing times, of the people, of the issues. So that's exciting. And we'll take that away. I'll take that away, and we'll see what the future holds.
Many people didn't get their ballots in 2021 when there was a close leadership race between Heather Stephenson and Shelley Glover. The party has now replaced the one-person, one-vote system with a sliding scale that caps the votes of bigger constituencies. Khan says that will encourage leaders to grow support from all across Manitoba. Immigrants looking to resettle in Canada may have higher odds of doing so in Manitoba soon if they already have family here. The NDP government's refocusing the provincial nominee program. That program matches foreign workers with labour needs in this province. Now it's giving priority to candidates who also have close family connections in Manitoba. Ryan Kuffner is president and CEO of Economic Development Winnipeg.
By doing both, we're not just attracting the talent we need to fill the skills gaps that we have, but we're also maximizing that retention piece, which is critically important when we bring people into the province.
Manitoba Labour Minister Malaya Marcelino says the nominee program will continue to be primarily an economic initiative. Well, it wasn't a normal, pleasant day to head to the park yesterday. Still, dozens of families, caregivers, and their children braved bitter cold to fly kites at St. Vital Park in solidarity with Gaza. Pascal Nowicki is one of the organizers at Family Actions for Palestine.
Kids are drawn to justice, and the concepts are very simple: caring for others, protecting those who are not protected. And so for them to be able to get involved in a way that feels accessible to them is very important.
Nowicki says the event was part of a global initiative for people to fly kites in solidarity with Gaza as the war between Israel and Hamas continues. The war marked its 100th day yesterday. You can find more news updated throughout the day. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Heather, you were talking about the power outage around Strathclair this morning. So Peter Harvey's been sending us little notes through the morning talking about how cold it was, and then the power came back, as you said, to park customers. And he just wants to shout out hydro workers who are outside today. Yeah. Right. So big shout out to anyone who's working outside today. Abby, what's it going to be like for the rest of this Monday?
Yes, we're still under the extreme cold one in southern Manitoba, including Winnipeg and parts of the north. And in Churchill, it's blizzard warning. In Winnipeg today, we have light snow around noon. The wind is going to peak up, gusting to 60. We're looking at a high of -20 with a risk of frostbite. And tomorrow, it's -17 with light snow. Brandon, 60% chance of light snow with a risk of frostbite. Thompson, light snow and blowing snow, high of -24. In Churchill, blowing snow, -18 and high and for the frostbite in minutes. Thompson and Churchill right now it's -21. Gimli -23. -25 in Brandon, -25 in Steinbach, -25 in Morris. And Winnipeg, it's -24.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
Last look. I know you just did a big roundup of traffic, Nolan, but what should you leave us with?
And even in the 5 minutes that I've been away, I've got a new update. Portage at St. James has a stalled vehicle in the eastbound median lane, so keep right to get past that. We also have Keniston at Sterling Lyon. Keep left to get past a stall in the northbound curb lane. We've been talking about the McPhillips water main break at Church Avenue today, so you're going to want to watch out for that throughout the day. And our friends at Up to Speed will be back here at 3 o'clock to keep you updated and get you home safely. And I'll be back here with your commuter tips tomorrow morning here on Information Radio.
All right, thanks, Nolan.
You bet.
Nolan Kaler and Abby Adeyemi, as well as Travis Peterson and Brad Lillies. Thank you, guys. All on the other side of the glass this morning on our YouTube channel and on the show. Thanks to our news department, Megan Ketchison, Joni Nicolo, and Heather Wells. And take care, be well. Thank you for listening to Information Radio. We are back again tomorrow here on CBC. Extra thanks to our teams, our associate producers, and our leaders in our current affairs unit at CBC Manitoba, Leif Larson and Nellie Gonzalez. I'm Marcy Marcusa. The Current is coming up next. Stay with us.